Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Y'all Mean of Revolution, and we have the class of the civilizations. It's here. Class of the civilizations is here. But first, before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. You in the House of Revolution. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe, support the platform. London Bridges is falling down. London Bridges is falling down. My fair lady. It is all like mayhem in England. Clash of civilizations. The police are standing down, letting the white mob attack and beat, burn, brutalize. You know, this should be reported more on the news about what the hell is going on over there.
They're in the hotel, guys.
Yeah. Salute. This soon will be happening over here, so y'all gotta prepare yourself. This soon will be happening over here. Y'all gotta be ready for the angry racist march to attack the streets, to attack people in the streets. While the police are standing, why are all these police officers being beaten and attacked? Why they let these people loot and burn? And don't ever forget this. You see, yes, it's a migrant crisis here. We want everybody to stay in your country. We'll help you there. But don't ever forget, our ancestors, this type of crowd used to bust into police stations, drag our ancestors out of there, lynch them, burn them, beat them. They just, so we got to keep our eyes on this type of angry crowd. And then the more I'm listening to this crowd, they're talking about they're tired of the racism against whites. Like, whoa, what the hell are you talking about?
Oh.
We got to take England back. England is an imperialist nation. All these officers should be fired right here. All these officers should be fired. They're not doing nothing as this angry crowd storms this hotel, burning it, beating the police, throwing chairs out. These police officers absolutely doing nothing. But they didn't kill several people in Britain. Unarmed people say they fear for their life. You didn't fear for your life when they beating you. See, a lot of these are a bunch of radicals too. Racist fanatics. So we did get to see the police. So because I'm gonna show you. So I showed a little bit of this earlier in the video I did, but I had to show you the earlier video. I didn't get to show you the police was standing right there. You see, so we do know the police were standing right there getting beat as this crowd stormed this migrant hotel. The police did nothing. But we done heard this same type of crowd.
Oh, wow.
They killed Black Lives Matter protesters when they started looting and robbing. This same crowd is looting in Britain, robbing in Britain, burning down, busting property. I thought this crowd didn't like this type of vandalism and hooliganism. You see? No, this type of crowd, their ancestors. This is what they did. This is what they do when they get upset. But they put it all on Black Lives Matter, call them communists if you destroying property. What the hell are you doing? Are these communists right here? Why are they burning down the motels and hotels? We don't want migrants here. So you burning down the motels and the hotels?
One of them got their ass out down that side, started sticking it in window.
While the police and then watch. The police have killed over less because you're not supposed to damage property. Remember, police is here to protect property. And remember, this is what Kyle Rittenhouse got away with murder for. Never forget, Kyle Rittenhouse got away with murder because he was there to protect property. You gotta watch these hypocrites in this crowd. They don't give a damn about no migrants. They've been waiting a long time to burn, loot, steal, beat people, lynch people, hang people. I'm just checking the temperature in America because this is what's going to happen right here real soon.
They're all going in.
Y'all got to be prepared.
They're all going in through that entrance and that entrance. Pure carnage. Pure carnage.
Okay, so we do know the police in Britain has been standing down. They have been allowing these bigots. All right, hold on. So here we have an army of hooligans. They said they're going to fight Antifa.
Come up again. Come on, Nick. Come on. Get. Look. Stand. I take a stand. Come on in! Joe! Let's go!
They've been trying to keep this off the news, distracting everybody. But it's been looking like this in London for the last couple of days. There's revolution going on over there. Radical white revolution. They marching through the streets, marching. They surrounding mosques.
More. Come on.
And why you gotta be very weary of this is because if you look at history, when you look at a lot of our people used to get lynched and beat. Oh, he whistled at a white lady, and then they get like this. See, on a drop of a dime, they would do this behind anything. Oh, the migrants, get them! Oh, please, these people don't give a damn about no migrants because why? These people are quiet. They won't say one word about the U.S., about Britain and the U.S. going into these countries, destroying them, sending migrants flooding to these countries. See, if these people really gave a damn about their country, they would say no to all wars, any wars in these migrants' countries. Because this is what you get. See, these are hypocrites. They want the cake and eat it too. They want to invade countries, steal everything, kill everything, and then they want nobody coming back to their goddamn country. See, these is dirty bastards. We the real, and then they going by the slogan, Patriots. Revolutionary, it's revolution is where life. Salute family. I don't like that. We the real patriots. Real patriots don't want to attack other countries. They want to help their country. Real countries want to help migrants where they at. Don't want to kill them in their countries. You see, these racist bastards hide behind patriotism and just want to loot and pillage and plunder. Now they got a reason to attack blacks, Arabs, and Muslims. Salute, but now, y'all prepare. Because y'all gotta be ready. Because it's going to happen here real soon. So we got the same migrant situation that they're going to use. And they know we pissed. All kind of communities is pissed. But we got to pay attention to the racist bastards. They try to come out the patriots. Why? Who you talking? You just got here. You trying to come late. How long your ancestors been on this continent? And that's another thing I'm going to start talking to them about. Why do they hate their ancestral homeland so much? Oh, we came here for a better life. Why you didn't like France? What was so crappy about France? Oh, we came from Germany. Why you can't stand the homeland of your grandmother? Huh? Oh, we come from Italy. Why you can't stand Italians? You hate yourself. We got to let them know that. All of your ancestors came here because they didn't like where they was from. That's a problem. See? They got identity crisis. We got to fix this shit once and for all, man. We the only ones didn't do that. So we never abandoned our homeland to run somewhere else, make it better. Y'all better be ready, man. I want the little brothers to hear my voice because always some little brothers never pay attention when it's up, and then they getting whooped and chased by some white boy. Be ready. You don't be the one. Because while you talking about the migrants, there's motherfuckers in this country looking at you like you a migrant. Come on, they the real patriots. We're not going for that shit because that's us. We the real patriots. You abandon your homeland, you're not fucking patriot. We don't need you to love America. We love it. Look at these hooligans. Y'all see from all these bastards go to jail for assault, hooliganism, terrorism, all that shit. Look at Britain, y'all. This is England that they're trying to keep us off the news. You got one in the face, didn't you? Run up to the front line again, acting tough. I do not condone any violence. I respect you keeping the guidelines too. They're having a big Royal Rumble. They're having a big Royal Rumble, y'all. We're just looking at it from this angle. I got some more we're gonna see. But I just want y'all to see the gathering of large crowds. Fighting, bottles, sticks, white on white violence. That needs to stop. That needs to stop. I'm one of the only black revolutionaries who was tired of white on white violence. It's been too much white on white crime. That's serious business. It's too much. And right now, we got white on white superpowers like Russia and the US saying, hey, if the other one make the wrong move, everybody die. Stop it. Please stop it, white on white criminals.
Why's the police protecting them?
Civilizations, man. All right, we've seen a little of that. Now, I need y'all to. All right. Let's see one more little clip of a large gathering of the whites, the radical whites, I'll say that, marching to the mosque. They're going to the mosque to drag people out and beat them. So it's a Christian crusade. This shit ain't funny, but this is real. They hiding this from y'all. Look at all of these people trying to coat their faces, talking about they're going to surround the mosque. They're going to get them Muslims, get them Muslim immigrants out their country.
Stop mass immigration, save the children. There's a few thousand.
They're talking about they're going after the pedophiles. Oh, really? Look at the damn mirror. They use any excuse to do this type of shit. That's serious business, man. But when they got an excuse, this is going to show you, when they got the excuse, this how they act, nigga. All they needed was an excuse to come together like the good old days. Terrorizing people in England right now. That's crazy. Black people inside, scared to death. That's real talk.
There is thousands. Finland are making a stand.
All right, I'll get you. Come around.
See what happened when you got Ukraine, Joe Biden, and Democrats? These are our buddies.
There's thousands.
Thousands of people talking about they're going to surround the mosque. But guess what? I'm going to show you the Muslims. The Muslims in Britain ain't going for it. They not having it. See, they ain't laying down like black people do. Oh, hell no. They outside. They want war. You see, and they're not protesting. They're not protesting. They don't see their leaders in the British Muslim community. They're not shoe shining right now behind this shit. They say, oh, you want to attack us? We're going to meet you and greet you. What happened was they done let too many radicals. When it got into Gaddafi, they had all of the radicals from Libya over there. When they wanted to kill Saddam, all of the radicals from. When they wanted to kill the Syrians, ISIS, Al Qaeda, chilling. See, every time the anti-Hezbollah, the anti-Hamas. See, these people, it's in these countries like America. You see, they don't like Britain. They don't like America. They want to overthrow their countries and bring Sharia to Britain and America. Now all these people should go to jail because they're committing a criminal act. You don't get to go surround no mosque. You don't get to go surround no mosque. What the hell? These people crazy though. They want to burn it, drag people outside, pillage, plunder, rape, sexual assault.
11.8K
Look at these
views
kids, these women. They're ridiculous,
for
bro.
the Sunderland demonstration.
Okay. Now, if y'all thought that was a little much, okay. So look what the Muslims. Now, what the Muslims did was totally disrespectful, nigga. They shut their whole city down, nigga. They say, man, y'all ain't that little walk y'all did wasn't nothing, nigga. We'll show y'all want to walk. We'll show y'all on March.
Central London was brought to a screeching halt so that some Muslims could celebrate Al-Shura Day.
Peace, family.
Why was it announced that the street would be shut down, sir?
Now look at this
You're
shit.
the sergeant, aren't you?
And the police, they got to protect them.
I don't think these guys were expecting it. Welcome to number one of my videos. Will you join me standing in the middle of Regent Street on a Wednesday
all of these dudes,
at 5 p.m.
they
rush
want-
hour
they
in
want
London?
those
This is when the
white boys
traffic is
to
at its
do
most
like that.
heavy, and yet London has been shut down. Metropolitan Police don't know what they're doing. Now we have all of this traffic here grounded to a halt.
So the Metropolitan Police decided to close several major roads so a procession could march through the capital. They said officers are present to minimise disruption and deal with any incidents. Okay, incidents like this?
Ambulance cannot get through, it's now having to reverse. This is the competency of the Metropolitan Police in London. This is what happens when some people get free passes and others do not. This is a free pass for a certain segment of the population. I'm all for people celebrating their culture, their history, but this seems like a show of force. This is a show of force, and it's causing huge disruption to central London on a Wednesday during rush hour.
They come to intimidate them. They did it to themselves to control the Islamic world. See, they used the old Egypt used to do this, Rome used to do this. You bring traders and the princes and the royal families of these nations you want to overthrow. You bring them to your country, you raise them up in your country, then you send them back to their countries to overthrow their countries. Anybody who helps you to bring down their nations, I keep telling you, if you look around in America, how the hell do you think these Arabs got these stores? Huh? Why do you think the Asian people have these stores? These are Korean sellouts. These are Japanese sellouts. These Arabs, these are Arab sellouts who've been run away from their homeland, and the U.S. had to give them, okay, here's a consolation prize. It didn't work. We'll give you some land in America. Why do you think, what happened when the fall of Afghanistan? You witnessed a lot of Afghan traders have to come here. I've seen on the news they were giving them big farmland contracts, new identities. You see? But so you have those people here pissed. They want to go home and overthrow the government. Now they have a new community here, like in Minnesota, the Somali community. Why is it a Somali community in Minnesota? What's going on in Somalia? We're trying to overthrow the Somali government. Come on, man. 1 + 1 is 2, man.
I mention of this in this stuff. I don't think the traffic really expected that day to be disrupted by this. And yeah, here we are, the Metropolitan Excuse me, officer. This wasn't mentioned that this was going to happen today. There wasn't going to be a procession down Regent Street.
We've got to defend ourselves.
The problem we got is we got an open border. We have an open border. So it's real hard line motherfuckers that done snuck into America.
So just they can get away with that, yeah? So the Metropolitan Police just found out themselves they weren't even aware this route was going to happen, but under Sadiq Khan, you're allowed to march wherever you want as long as you support a certain religion. If you support this country, if you support other things that aren't part of the message, Metropolitan Police will come down on you hard.
There appears to be quite a stark contrast here to how police sought to deal with people wanting to watch England play in the Euros final. They issued an antisocial behaviour order throughout the whole of the borough of Westminster, a huge area, which meant that groups of people gathering and drinking could essentially be arrested.
Hey, them ain't the flags of peace, man. That's serious business, bro. I'm a revolutionary. I know the flags of Islamic peace, man. That ain't it.
So this wasn't announced, for sure. No, it was. There's no mention on the TFL website. This is going to place that, right? It was. So if you just tell me what?
You want to put up the flags of conquest, man.
Really? Shut down the street. Officer, there was no announcement that the Regent Street would be shut down today. Why was there no announcement that Regent Street would be shut down today?
That's what I talked to my friend. It'd be my sergeant. He's on top there. He's got 3 stripes on his shoulders. He's a lot more vision than I am. I get to follow the procession, make sure everyone's safe.
Okay, it just seems like quite weird. Other processions usually get shut down by the police when they go off track. But
Like I said, I get told to make sure everyone's safe. I follow the procession. My best
They took over.
Sergeant at the top there, he'll have all right for you.
And where is he? Where is he? A nice shot from here. I can't see it.
Sergeant, he's got 3 stripes on his shoulders. He's about 8 people up now. Okay?
Leading the procession, eh?
He'll know more than I will, sir.
You haven't got your riot gear on today.
Sir.
Well, normally you would. You needed it on St George's Day.
This is an important thing as well, all that, sir.
It seems to be cleared.
They ain't got no permits, no nothing. They just doing this.
What about these guys?
All on the other side of the road.
Oh, I see. So where was it announced? When was it announced that this place would be shut down? It wasn't on the TFL website. You guys didn't announce it today. Officer, you're the sergeant, aren't you? You're the sergeant with 3 stripes on your head.
The Muslims are going to just hog their street, take it over.
Can I get a quote for the press?
So I'm a bit busy at the moment.
You're not that busy.
That's the civilization. They say if the whites
When
gonna
was
come
it
out and
announced
loot
that
and
this would be
ride,
shut down?
they're coming out deep. They say you looking for them? Here they go.
Care to comment? When was it announced that the street would be shut down, sir? You're the sergeant, aren't you? I don't think these guys were expecting it. Yes, please. As the sergeant in this line, sir, when was it announced that the street was going to get shut down? You care to comment to the press? Is there someone higher up that I can ask that question to? When was it announced that Regent Street would be shut down today? When was it announced, sir? Okay, I appreciate your comment. I attempted to get comment from the police officer in regards to when was this route announced.
The police
No comment from the police officer. Funny that. So you guys are media.
Yeah.
When was it announced? When was your route announced?
To be honest, I think it was around a week ago.
There's no notification on the TFL website that Regent Street was going to get shut down.
That's not with us. That's with TFL.
Yeah, but you guys announced your route, yes?
Yes.
From where? Marble Arch to Trafalgar Square?
I need to double check that. I'm just making sure people are safe.
But you're the media team, no?
Yeah, it's just part of the
Who's
making sure the media.
who's in charge of the route?
I don't know.
No?
I used to walk around complaining. You ain't gonna do nothing.
Do you know when this route was announced, sir? Sorry? Do you know when this route was announced? There's no mention on TfL website that Regent Street was going to be shut down. You're leading the procession.
I direct you towards our
Oh, what the baby gonna do, man? You gonna throw some blows or what?
Comstein, the base Scotland Yard.
Yeah, well, they're not out, are they? Okay. I don't think they're even aware which way this procession's going, are they?
God, said they was looking for the Muslims outside, they done popped out. Now you took out your camera, man. I thought you were looking for them, man. It's the class of civilizations, man. All had the same plan. King done fled the country. I know the king done fled.
I do think that the optics of it are quite stark. And I think that tourists might have been like, what the heck is this all about? And, you know, the road closures and things like our arterial routes at Oxford Street, there's Regent Street, you know, Marble Arch, you know, there seems to be no qualms whatsoever about shutting those down on a work day as well.
Yeah, look, as you said, this isn't a weekend, this is a weekday. This affects the economy. Major roads, major tube stations shut because of this.
What are you going to do about it?
So we have a route.
What are you going to do about it? No, I got some more videos. I'm going to show you the white mobs burning, looting, rioting, punching, kicking. But here are the Muslims. They done popped outside. They ready to be martyrs. They want it with them. Why the hell is the white revolutionaries don't win? Here go one. This is one of them. He done put on a suit and tie. Oh, you want to hit a man with glasses with you? Man, take them glasses off. You just was in the streets talking shit.
It's through Regent Street on a Wednesday, blocking all this traffic. But no problem. No problem. The city can't holding up all this traffic.
Let's just remember as well, black cabs in London were not even allowed to show to have English flags on them. I think there's real mixed messages that we're sending. Right? It's like our flag is not okay. Religious flags, perfectly fine. And I think that's the wrong message.
Where all this traffic being held up.
See, the white revolution.
I've always had a profound love for England and the diverse nations within Europe. From the picturesque landscapes to the rich tapestry of history and culture, there's an endless array of wonders to discover. Hence, probably why I call myself the Wandering Englishman, because I wonder what lies over there and I wonder what is over there. I don't aimlessly wonder, I wonder. My fondness for exploring different cultures has taken me around the world, broadening my...
The poor, impoverished whites, they don't understand. They could thank their leaders for this. All these European countries, the American whites, they could thank the leaders for this. They wanted black people and brown people and poor people to serve them, you know, so they didn't have to pay their own people money, equal pay and things of that nature and proper pay and any money at all, because we were doing it for free at one time. This is what that happened. Their civilization gonna crumble beneath them. It would never be like the good old, this used to be a land of white man, all that nonsense, something they heard about, they read it in their great-great-great-granddaddy's diary. They never know no land like that. And it hurt so much. And then they keep importing, especially Europe. But see, in Europe, they have an Islam problem. Why? Because you see, we have a South American problem at our border, because that's what we're dealing with. But Europe, they're dealing with the Islamic problem because they're terrorizing Islamic countries and all of the migrants is flowing to their borders. They're terrorizing Africa and the poor Africans is flowing to their border. America is terrorizing South America and the South Americans is flowing to their border. That's exactly what's happening.
My horizons and deepening my appreciation for the unique heritage that each country has to offer. However, as a Londoner and an Englishman, I can't help but notice a significant and concerning shift. England, particularly in cities like London, is witnessing a demographic transformation that is both rapid and unprecedented.
Data from the 2021 census shows white British people have become a minority in London, making up just 44.9% of the population. And you've got to realize this is 2024, and it's only gone in one direction since then. The trend is not isolated to London. It is mirrored in all major cities across England. To put it into perspective, so some who simply are blind to this is akin to visiting Tokyo and finding that Japanese people are no longer the majority. Such demographic shift raises important questions about identity, community cohesion, and the preservation of cultural.
There's not like this because Japan is waging war nowhere. If Japan was still waging war in the Koreas, it'd be a lot of Koreans. If they were still waging war in China, it'd be a lot of Chinese peasants flooding to their border. If they were still waging war in the Philippines, it would be the same thing. See, they think they're slick. But since Japan is warring on no one, then they have a Japanese civilization. It's not a bunch of migrants flooding to their border because the war, and that's what China is trying to keep out of Asia. That BS right there, what America is trying to do, and it's a trick, but it's to bring down civilizations, to mix the population. Once you mix a bunch of cultures, a bunch of different civilizations, it's never going to be the same, and they're going to always clash like this.
Heritage. While I celebrate diversity and the contributions of various communities to our society, I also believe it is crucial to maintain the unique cultural identity of England and Europe as a whole.
Now,
as a
England
Londoner,
has no unique cultural identity. That's a myth. You see, and a lot of people want to fall for that. What the hell? That's a bunch of different tribes put together to even make England, the United Kingdom, Scottish, Welsh. Yeah, you just have so many different people. See, that's what another thing we don't really know. We just all white. They a bunch of different clans. They got themselves. The Irish don't want to. The Irish don't want to be have nothing to do with the Scottish. The people want to separate from the Anglo-Saxon. This is a problem they brought to upon their goddamn self for being imperialist and always trying to conquer people's shit. Then always tell France got the same problem. That's in France right now. Just last year they had a class of civilization. Riots is going on every goddamn well. They want the migrants gone. Why? Because of what they've been doing in Africa. You see, they let all those migrants flow into their countries to clean their houses, work in their restaurants. You know, I told you the petty serving jobs. But now it's becoming a big time problem.
No, I all too often feel like a minority and an alien in my own city. People are putting a very aggressive stamp, in my view, of occupation on the city. The case in point is this recent Islamic march that clearly I witnessed shutting down streets and traffic in London. Despite Transport for London not listing this march on their website, the march managed to shut down Regent Street and Oxford Street. The police, clearly too cowardly to do anything other than bend the knee, stood by and gawked, whereas on days like St. George's Day and Remembrance Day, the Metropolitan Police took out their batons on the native and peaceful population. This is the definition of two-tiered policing. And this is also why most natives feel...
Two-tier policing. So you hear a lot of that going on. Oh, it's two-tier justice system. One for peaceful whites, then the other ones. I just laugh like, are you kidding me? Try me a river about the two-tier justice system. You didn't believe it when we said it, huh? They're just treating people different. Oh yeah? Oh really? Who you telling? I haven't seen no dogs, no water cannons, and these people tearing this city up.
It is going in the wrong direction. In the past, I had a huge respect for hardworking policemen and women. It still remains steadfast. Individuals across the country, in London, and across the world who call themselves cops put their lives on the line daily to ensure our safety and uphold the law. I'm not having a go at police officers because those that have gained employment through hard work and dedication and are fit for the job, they have my full respect. However, I am increasingly concerned about the state of the Metropolitan Police Force and many police forces around the country in 2024. It seems that the Met, for example,
see bigots like this. The police is good when they beating on us and brutalizing us. Then they good cops doing their job. When they don't do what the whites want them to do, now it's something sinister going on here.
A once proud institution has become politicized, serving not only the interests of the people, but rather succumbing to the pressures exerted by the current, corrupt, useless Mayor of London. This shift in focus has led to a loss of public trust and a sense that the police are more concerned with appeasing political agendas than addressing the real issues faced by our communities. Prioritization of certain narratives over impartial law enforcement, in my opinion, undermines the very foundation of public service and erodes the principles of justice and equality. My love for England is deeply rooted in my appreciation for its rich cultural history and the values it represents. Yet I find myself troubled by
his love for England is rich cultural, imperialistic, racist, bigoted slave history. See, that's what's wrong with these people. They just grew up in the wrong time. It's never, like I say, they're gonna cry forever. They're gonna be dead and gone. Their ancestors gonna be crying because they never gonna be able to live like the slave movies. See, that's oh man, everywhere I go, I gotta see other people. Yeah, bastard. You destroyed these countries. Now these other people's there. You on with us. You see, like the Bible says, it's blood on your hands. When you look at us, bitch, that's because you got your history is dirty. You see, you done this to yourself. But like I said, a lot of these people, they left the homeland they come from. They don't like their ancestry. Plus, a lot of people in America. You know, like I say, once again, the Europeans in America, they got to face the ones calling themselves America. You got to really face deep down inside that your ancestors abandoned their native land. They didn't like it. It wasn't never crap. The history books talking about Europe or some great land. Well, why the hell did they all abandon it?
Demographic changes in the UK. It is my hope that we can navigate these challenges with a commitment to preserving our cultural heritage, supporting our law enforcement in their true mission, and fostering a society where every individual, regardless of their background, can thrive. But at what cost must we give up our society and our country for the globalist agenda of turning every single nation into a soup, which in turn destroys heritage, history, and culture? London should be majority English.
That's racist. Huh? London should be the land of the white man. You had your chance, but you want to invade every other country. Now you get what you got coming to you. London should be majority English. What's an Englishman? So you don't want the Scots there? You don't want the Welsh there, right? You don't want no Irish there? Okay. See, these people just be talking their ass off until when you get what's up, you say, oh, you whining because your people was imperialist. Stop destroying it. Look, if they think it's a bunch of Muslims in their country, nigga, let Iran attack Israel. Let that Middle East war kick off. It won't be no white people in Europe no more. That's serious business.
The UK is grappling with the worst riots in the last 13 years as fresh violence sweeps across the country for the 5th day in a row. Authorities are facing growing pressure to put an end to the unrest linked to Southport killings. Take a look at these visuals.
This the white BLM. This White Lives Matter. This is White Lives Matter march, y'all. You see what happened? You see what happened when bigots White Lives Matter march. And that's what this is. They marching because they say white people matter. They want the country. You heard them. They want the country to be majority white. So let's just take all the pretty wrapping off of this story. This is a White Lives Matter march. Now I remember when Black Lives Matter was going. They show riots all over the different cities, trying to humiliate us, like black people were just looting and stealing all over the U.S. country, which some people was. There were a bunch of Antifa doing that shit too, and the government. They have some fools doing that bullshit, you know, youngsters. But so here, White Lives Matter, man, they doing the same thing.
Unrest related to misinformation about a mass stabbing that killed 3 girls early this week has spread to multiple towns and cities, with far-right anti-immigration demonstrators clashing with police in several places. The latest masked anti-immigration miscreants smashed several windows at a hotel in South Yorkshire's Rotherham that has been used to house asylum seekers. There have been standoffs between far-right anti-immigration and counter-protesters in other places across the UK. Shocking videos have emerged where rioters can be seen looting booze in Manchester.
Oh shit, look. Yes, make sure y'all share this all over social media, that White Lives Matter, and y'all tag it that, hashtag White Lives Matter. We coined it that here. White Lives Matter is looting, pillaging, and plundering stores all over the UK. Now, why is that? Why does that matter? Because that's what they made fun of blacks and call them thugs and hooligans. Oh, the same suspects. Oh, well, here you go. White Lives Matter said they was tired of migrants. And what does you stealing out the store? Remember they asked us that? Why? Oh, what does stealing out the store got to do with George Floyd? Well, what does you stealing out this store and looting got to do with the migrants?
Rioters can be seen setting vehicles on fire too. More than 90 people have been arrested in the last 24 hours after skirmishes broke out at far-right rallies in numerous places, including Liverpool, Manchester, Bristol, Blackpool, and Hull, as well as Belfast in Northern Ireland. In some instances, rioters threw bricks, bottles, and flares at the police, injuring several officers, looted and burned shops.
You heard that?
Far-right demonstrators.
Rioters and looters, the White Lives Matter crew, threw bricks, bottles. I thought they backed the blue. That was another scam. I told you this man did. Oh my goodness, karma. They backed the blue when they beating us and killing our unarmed loved ones. Oh, what did they do? They should have been snoring when the police came in and shot them. Don't be snoring. You if you sleep when the police coming out, don't wiggle, don't move. That's what they say. Why are you resisting when the police shoot you 13 times in the back? You shouldn't have been resisting. They said lay there and play dead. You didn't play dead, now you is dead. See? Now White Lives Matter is upset. So they beat the police and loot and burn the city.
Demonstrators shouted anti-Islamic slurs as they clashed with counter-protesters. As the tensions spiral, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the riots unorganized violence. The violence is posing a major test for the Prime Minister, who was elected only a month ago after leading Labour to a landslide win over the Conservatives.
And the media don't want to talk about this, man. That the White Lives Matter protesters done took over England streets. And the Muslim migrants is coming out deep. They want to fight them, you know.
Arrangements are in place for that.
They done had a few battles.
Whatever it takes to ensure that the message is absolutely clear that if you're taking part in this violence, you will regret it and you'll be brought to justice as quickly as possible.
The violence is the worst England has seen since the summer of 2011, when widespread rioting took place following the police killing of a mixed-race man in North London.
The White Lives Matter criminals burning police stations.
This evening bring.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Why don't they back the blue anymore?
There is an increased police presence in a number of towns and cities across the country tonight. We're far right.
Huh? See something, say something. Why is the White Lives Matter crew burning police departments? They don't back the blue? Criminals? No, whoever burnt this police department, they need to be brought to justice. You can't be doing this to the police who just come to work every day to protect the community. That's what you told us. You told us the police were good people, and we must have been the criminals. You said that shit. Now, White Lives Matter criminals, you're upset. You're looting, you're pillaging, you're plundering, you're stealing, and you're burning police. Oh, my goodness. Is this the end of the world? White Lives Matter done went crazy.
far-right protesters have been gathering. In some places, dispersal notices or increased stop-and-search powers are in place to tackle antisocial behaviour, while a number of police officers have been injured in Liverpool and Hull, and there have been incidents this afternoon in Manchester, Stoke, Nottingham and Belfast. Riot police have separated rival far-right and anti-racist protesters who are facing off in a number of cities across the UK. In the last few minutes, police said they had made 4 arrests in Hull, where 3 officers were hurt during clashes. Our reporter Andrew Misra is in Liverpool, where police say they're dealing with serious disorder in the city centre, and a number of officers have been injured there too. Andrew.
Kieran, we haven't seen the same level of violence that we saw in Sunderland last night here in Liverpool this afternoon, but there has been serious disorder, as you say. One police officer was even hit in the head by a chair, and a lot of anger we've seen here from rival groups of protesters. There's been a big police presence working really hard to try to contain those two groups. It has settled down a little bit now, and you can probably see.
Where the police dogs? Where the water guns? Where the rubber bullets? Is you really working that hard? Racism right in your face. See, this is the problem, man. This is the problem. This is how people get lynched when the police don't really put their foot down on the White Lives Matter criminals who've been doing this type of shit for centuries.
See behind me that there are still sirens, the police are still here, and there's a helicopter, police helicopter, still whirring above us. And at the same time as things felt like they were kicking off here, if you looked on social media, we're seeing very similar scenes of rival protesters around the country. We are expecting a statement from the Home Secretary about all of this any minute now, but what doesn't seem to have helped is that the weather has been very warm today, and that seems to have created a pretty febrile atmosphere.
That is disgusting. The weekend, but no end to the disorder, chaos and noise of the past week. From Liverpool, the Hull to Belfast. Sometimes all they need is just a hug. The afternoon started peacefully in Liverpool with an anti-racism protest at St George's Hall. Many in Merseyside horrified by riots that disrupted the grieving of 3 young girls, Alice, Bibi and Elsie, murdered in Southport just a few days ago.
It's a peace vigil for the 3 dead children, the injured, the families. We will not tolerate racism, not in this city, not in this country, not in this world.
I have no doubt whatsoever that the lovers out there far outnumber the haters. And that's what it's about. People coming together. We tend to find that people who are on the fringes of society, they're angry, they're very, very loud online when you go to these protests and rallies. But in reality, the vast majority of people just want to live a peaceful life.
After opposing protesters gathered outside a Liverpool mosque last night, a similar situation on a larger scale at the Pierhead this afternoon.
There are hundreds of protesters here, either side of a long line of police. On the far side, we've heard Islamophobic chants and shouts in favour of Tommy Robinson. On this side, chants against fascism and in favour of refugees.
This was mostly non-violent, unlike Sunderland last night, where people were out to cause trouble. Faces hidden, intent clear. Bricks thrown at riot police outside a mosque, cars and buildings burned, officers attacked, scenes worryingly familiar from recent nights.
If this is the response that they have to a really horrendous, violent murder of 3 little girls somewhere else in the country, if they want to use somebody else's grief to create violence, then they stand for nothing other than thuggery.
The day after the stabbing, far-right rioters in Southport were fueled by misinformation about the suspect. False rumours he was an asylum seeker proved definitively to be untrue after the suspect was charged with the murders and named as Axel Radicabana, born in Cardiff. But the initial outrage from the far right has taken hold and spread onto the streets of so many UK towns and cities. Back in Merseyside, landmarks will glow pink again tonight to put the spotlight back on the memory of 3 little girls who were just at a dance class when their lives were ended.
Andrew Misra there. Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to the leader of Stoke-on-Trent Council, Jane Ashworth, where hundreds of protesters have been gathering today amid reports of some outbreaks of violence. But first, Kim McGuinness, Mayor of the North East, who's been dealing with the fallout of last night's clashes in Sunderland. And they were ugly scenes, weren't they, Kim? What's the mood in Sunderland this evening?
Well, they were really ugly scenes, and we were really shocked and horrified by what we saw in Sunderland last night. But the mood today is one of a community coming together and standing very strong against what we saw last night. The community taking part in a massive clear-up operation this morning alongside the council, and making it very, very clear that those people rioting and seeking to cause violence do not speak for us. So I've come from last night feeling really angry and disappointed and shocked that these people think it's okay to behave like this in our towns and cities, to feeling really heartened by the community response today.
But Sunderland is a long way from Southport, isn't it? Why do you think that Sunderland was the focus of last night's disorder?
It is a long way from Southport, and of course these people organised what they were calling a peaceful protest and the auspices that it was about the horrific murders of those 3 little girls in Southport. But it was very clear from the very beginning that it was never about that at all. It was an excuse and a ruse to cause disorder and violence and chaos on our streets, and to attack and abuse people, and to adopt language of division and hate, which is just not acceptable, whilst attacking the police. I think we've seen, and it's been very clear over the last few days, that this is very organised. It's an organised right-wing agenda that we're seeing spread throughout the media, and it needs to come down.
Nah.
Sorry to come in.
See, this is what Britain get. Why? Because they've been backing the right wing in Ukraine. I knew this was going to happen. They've strengthened the right wing. And a lot of those brothers are organized. They've been fighting in Ukraine. They've helped organize. All of them say Ukraine motivate them, the Azov battalion. Now that all of a sudden they don't like right wing. Well, why the hell you been sending hundreds of $billions to the right wing in Ukraine? Now they don't like fascism. Oh yeah, why are you backing fascism in Ukraine? So these people are hypocrites, and these people are liars. And the chicken's coming home to roost, like Malcolm said.
Come in there, Kim. But the deputy leader of Sunderland Council said that many people were not from the city and came to cause chaos. What do you know about where they did come from?
That's a lie. Those people from right there. See, this is the playbook all these liars use. They use it in every city. It's out of town people who are causing the chaos. That's not how we feel. Come on, man. That's how everybody feels.
And I'm sure that that's quite true. People have, we've heard reports of day also of people saying there are recognizable faces from other protests around the country. But the fact is that these have been organized and coordinated nationally online by the right wing, and they are encouraging people to commit very serious crime and disorder, and to spread hate and division in our towns and cities.
And what's going to put a stop to it, Kim? What's going to put a stop to this disorder?
Well, we've seen a very strong police response, certainly in Sunderland, and I'm very grateful to Northumbria Police for that. They continue to make arrests today, and I want these people to face the full force of the law. But at the same time, we really need to tackle the cause of this and really hold the social media companies that are allowing hate and disinformation and the organisation of these events to spread online, and identify those people who are starting this in those right-wing groups who are seeking to commit this violence on our streets.
Okay. Kim McGuinness, Mayor of the North East, thank you very much for speaking with us. Let's go now to Jane Ashworth, who's the leader of Stoke-on-Trent City Council. What's your understanding, Jane, of the violence and disorder, the extent of it in Stoke today?
It's not been as bad as it has in other parts of the country, I'm very pleased to say. It appears to be the case that, as Kim McGuinness said, organised through social media, about a few hundred people turned up, clearly intent on causing trouble. It was their intention to whip up emotions. It was their intention to take on the police where possible. It was their intention to, I think, probably right from the start, though I can't be sure, to march on an unguarded mosque in part of the town centre.
And did they? What happened?
It's still going on. It's still going on. But what we're seeing that's probably extremely interesting and extremely important is that while this is going on and the police are going to be able to contain them, there's no problem about that here, is that the social media companies are allowing people to say that someone's been stabbed when they haven't. There is no record of a stabbing.
So you're speaking in relation to reports of violent clashes between protesters and counter-protesters outside the mosque in Hamlin. Now, there have been some reports about
one of the white radicals saying that white guys got stabbed by some Muslims. The dude was standing out, blood everywhere. They said he stabbed a bunch of blood. Hey, the dude looked to stab, man. But they're trying to act like they're lying about the violence. That's a damn lie. They telling the truth.
What may have happened there, but there have been violent clashes there. You're sure of that?
Yes, missiles have been thrown. That's correct.
Have there been injuries?
You heard the lady, missiles have been thrown, projectiles, homemade projectiles. And this lady talked about somebody didn't get stabbed. Ma'am, so, class of civilizations, man, where you're sitting in your damn house talking about they do not speak for us. Well, go in the streets and tell them that. While our whole lives, our people get lynched, then bougie liberals, just like Malcolm X was talking about, they do not speak for us. We're with the blacks. In your house, you with them. Go in the streets. And
some minor injuries. At the moment, what it seems to be the case is that injuries are minor. Now that may turn out to be more serious as the day progresses. So I couldn't say that for certain, but that appears to be the case. 4 people have been arrested at the moment. And as I say, the matters are still going on.
So you believe the situation is under control right now?
Insurance company, Mal?
Yes.
What are your fears for what may happen this evening?
I think it's possible tonight that more people may want to join in, or it's possible that some people will decide if they genuinely attended the demonstration today because they felt deeply moved by the situation in Stockport. They didn't realise who was organising it, that it was a hard far right.
That's a lie.
Then they may well have gone home already.
We didn't know it was the Nazis.
I think if
you
you made a
were hooking up
mistake,
with the Nazis, man.
you'd go.
What's your message, Jane, to those?
We're gonna watch some of the videos. I'll tell you in the beginning of this live. When you go back and watch the videos where they storming the hotel, migrant hotel, beating the police stand down, thousands of them storming the hotel, they burning it down, they busting out all the windows. You can see it's regular people there, grandmothers, grandfathers, regular people. This is how the people on January 6th ass got caught up in the bullshit. Well, I didn't go there for that. Your ass was with the business. You're with them. We didn't know they was going to be hardline Nazis. You didn't leave when you found out that they were radical Nazis neither.
Who are still on the streets of Stoke-on-Trent this evening?
Go home, and for everybody else, it's to be ready for us to the council that is together with the police. We will be issuing statements about how we get people together. We're talking to faith leaders too. We need to mobilise the decent people in the city to tell those residents of Stoke-on-Trent and those outsiders who joined in today that really we're not putting up with it.
Jane Ashworth, thank you so much for speaking with us. Well, clamping down on the unrest is posing a major challenge for police forces around the country, as well as the government, which will be eager to avoid the kind of wide-scale disorder last seen during the riots in 2011. So what powers do the police have, and how far will they be able to keep the situation from escalating? Simeon Brown has this.
For 10 months, central London has been shut down by the call for a ceasefire in Gaza. But this weekend, there is fear the far right may descend again. Now police resources are being stretched nationwide to stop them.
This weekend, the police are facing huge operational challenges. And although this protest has been peaceful so far, up and down the country, there are splintered far-right groups, and they're spoiling for a fight.
More than 30 far-right demonstrations have been planned across Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The authorities are now braced for a 4th night of unrest since the outbreak in Southport.
Nations. They talk about England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland.
This was Manchester city centre earlier.
Stop the boat!
Stop the boat, screams this activist, the slogan once embraced by Rishi Sunak. In response, the counter-protesters say refugees welcome. The buffer between both sides is held by a line of officers who have found themselves targeted by far-right demonstrators in the largest outbreak of civil disorder since 2011. You were brought in as borough commander overseeing Tottenham following the 2011 disorder to implement the lessons learned. Do you see parallels with the nature of the disorder right now?
I think mobilisation is absolutely key. Very few police forces will have enough resources to be able to deal with the disorders in their area. I mean, the Met and the bigger force, Metropolitan Police Service, your West Midlands, probably big enough to be able to manage dealing with multiple seats of disorder. But most forces are probably not big enough, and they will need what we describe as local aid.
There are other shared themes of 2011. When unrest broke out in Tottenham following the police killing of Mark Duggan, nationwide dissent was organised on BlackBerry Messenger. Today, the app's influence has been dwarfed by the convening power of social media.
People are actually sending messages to each other really quickly. People are gathering really quickly. It doesn't give the police enough time to be able to prepare and actually move as quickly. And those challenges I see as very similar.
But social media apps have not just mobilised but misinformed. In response to the murders of Alice de Silva Aguiar, BB King and Elsie Stankoom, it was on X, Telegram and WhatsApp where far-right disinformation was shared, falsely claiming the attacker was a newly arrived refugee of Islamic heritage. Now the flames of those untruths are yet to be quelled, and the government is under pressure to restore order.
What we sought to do in 2011 was to ensure that people who were arrested were being brought before the courts within 12 to 24 hours. And we had all-night courts, and the consequence of that was that very quickly the message was communicated that if you engaged in this type of behaviour, you were likely to find yourself ending up in prison.
This is the far-right's march in Manchester. As these outbreaks continue across the country, the lid on violence against minorities has been lifted.
See, this is what they want. This is what they want. White Lives Matter. It's going crazy over there in Europe, over there in England. They say the white man can't catch a break. The white man is losing his place in this world. Migrants and blacks and Mexicans, y'all sucking up all the resources.
Look at a number of places last night, including Blackpool, which is obviously a focus for me, being in the northwest.
Liverpool, Portsmouth, Nottingham, it was all over.
I mean, it's got to be a worry. Whatever your views, it's got to be a worry. Let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Morning to you, Peter. I mean, whatever the rights and wrongs of people who have legitimate concerns, when stuff ends up in the way it has been, I mean, it's got to be a concern. I mean, even just how do you possibly even attempt to police all this sort of stuff and run it through the courts as well?
As you quite clearly state, and very eloquently, Stephen, no matter what somebody's concerns are, if you pick up a brick or you pick up a bottle and you throw it at a police officer, you are an idiot. End of story. And unfortunately,
you're an idiot. Oh, I thought if you pick up a brick and throw that at a police officer, that's attempted murder and you could be killed. They forgot about that part. No, that's just for us. But for them, oh, you just an idiot. You're just a troublemaker. What a joke.
Yet another evening of violence when more police officers were injured. Something quite dramatic is going to have to happen here, because I see no sign at the moment of this unrest diminishing. In fact, I see it escalating and spreading. That does, of course, concern me, that if it goes beyond the capabilities of the police, will we have to be faced with the very unfortunate sight of troops on the streets of mainland Britain?
Yes, that has been mentioned already, that possibly we could bring the army in. And my goodness, I don't suppose anyone really wants to see that. But what else is going to quell this trouble? Yvette Cooper, the new Home Secretary, has said that anyone...
A lot of people can sue these people because they always do this. They always do this shit. They see their own as victims, and you know, it's not really their fault. They just upset about the migrant crisis. Oh, so they get to assault people, loot, pillage, and plunder? That's crazy.
Rioting in this aggressive way will feel the full force of the law. But what does that really mean?
It means that as soon as the police can gather evidence against people, they will knock on their front doors, and they will arrest them, charge them, and put them in front of a court. But the whole criminal justice system is in absolute crisis. The Labour Party, one of the first things they announced after being elected into government was that they were going to let thousands of people out of prison because there's no spaces. So are those thousands that are going to be released merely be replaced by people who have thrown bricks and bottles at the police? We shall have to wait and see. But essentially, this stems from the politicians. The politicians bear a huge amount of responsibility for getting the nation into this point where so many people feel frustrated, and I'm not condoning this in any way, shape or form, let me make that clear, but so many people get frustrated about the state of the country, about the rise of Islam, about unfettered immigration, that they go out onto the streets and create such mayhem.
Well, so many people will agree with you, Peter, and say, you know, obviously and as you put it, you cannot condone violence, and you especially cannot condone violence against police officers who are just trying to do their job. However, what we are seeing from politicians is just this move to quash what we're seeing now, but there is still no jaw on the other issues, and you can't do one without the other, can you?
And you can bring the army onto the streets, you can bring every police officer in the land onto the streets, you can put down the unrest, but the disquiet will not go away. And as long as politicians take a very broad brush and say that anybody who has concerns about the rise of Islam in the UK and unfettered immigration, as long as all those people are called far right, when of course many of them are moderate, mainstream, working hard, raising lovely kids, contributing to society, but just have concerns, as long as that conversation is shut down, this unrest will never go away.
Can I just ask you one thing about police tactics? Now that Yvette Cooper has said, you know, the full force of the law will be used. If this was happening in America, the police would be armed and they'd...
See, they just said if it was happening in America, the police would be armed. Yes, and so would the rioters and the looters. They don't have weapons like that in England. So that's why they'd be stabbings and shit. It would be worse because the radical white or Antifa or radical Mexicans or blacks or whoever, we got guns over here. We don't need that type of bullshit. But guess what? We got the same keg of gunpowder that could explode. It's the migrants that's pissing off every community. Anything can happen at any time. And when the white radicals, they're going to use that as a opportunity to push their bigoted, this is a white man's country nonsense, and we can't have that.
They'd be shooting by now, wouldn't they? If this was happening in Paris or elsewhere in France, they would have the water cannon out. What?
Revolutionary salute from our brother de jour Brewer for the $20 donation to the war chest. Revolution is way of life. I absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
Can our police do more than just standing behind riot shields?
You heard her. She said that if this was happening in France, they would at least have the water cannons out. I brought that up earlier. The police are absolutely standing down and allowing them to do this. They haven't even brought out no mace. Where's the stun guns? Where's the tear gas? They're just letting these people rampage through the city, destroy shit. That's crazy. That's criminal, too, on the police for doing that. Why? Because we know the police is supposed to be protecting property. They're not even protecting the property. Remember, Kyle Rittenhouse, and they killed people because he was protecting property. He went there to protect property. They can stand in front of property with weapons, and if you come near it, you can die.
Isn't there something more proactive they could be doing?
You're absolutely right, Anne. In other countries, by now, you would have seen water cannon, rubber bullets, CS gas, and other kinds of tactics, none of which we've seen over the last week or so. Yes, certain police forces are equipped with CS gas, for example, and what are called baton rounds or rubber bullets, but that would be such a huge decision that would have to be made at such a very senior level that it would open a can of worms that quite simply would probably never be closed again.
Yeah. Okay, Peter, as always, really good to get your perspective. Thank you.
I can see people at home thinking, typing now, saying, but, maybe that's what's needed. Extreme measures taken, decisions on that taken at the very top senior level. Isn't that what Yvette Cooper meant?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, I have to say, I'm with Peter on this. I think it would open up a can of worms, and I think it
would shut down the riots, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, it would.
The white male do not want to harm the white males that's rampaging. And this is again an old motherly white figure. She just tired of all that. She don't want that. She's like, we got to stop them. Bring in the army. The white male, they're like, no, we don't need that. You gotta understand. What are their complaints? What? You didn't say that about Black Lives Matter. You didn't want to hear no complaints. These same people said they was thugs. See, this is what they do. Maybe if George Floyd, if it really is a problem with what happened to George Floyd, why do you have to steal and loot and burn down stuff? Now look at them. And boy, the pot calling the kettle black.
Then if you shut down the riots, and I know the riots are the bad part of this, and I'm not trying to say anything else, and I think it's despicable. However, if you try to shut down all of this with force, without talking about the fact that so many people are frustrated, then you just make it worse.
No, I'm totally with you. The two things have to go together.
Yeah, because you'll end up, those moderate people will end up becoming frustrated enough to take action. Parliament, for heaven's sake, this needs to be discussed so that we can report on what politicians are saying about this.
And politicians discussing this may have some very good ideas and at least they should be reflecting the fears and the issues that concern their constituents. Isn't that their job?
There's too many people, and it's down to this racism line where people are frightened to say things because they're not racist and they don't want to appear racist. But if there are too many people who say...
You are racist. You're not racist if you don't want a bunch of migrants in your country. Hell no, you're not racist. You're a normal human being. You are racist if you okay with white nationalists brutalizing, pillaging, and plundering, and you don't even want tear gas to be thrown on them. You don't even want a stun grenade. Oh, you a racist because you want that from our people. And you want your people to be negotiated with. Let's understand where this anger is coming from. Oh, hell no. Absolutely not. You got to give them the same thing you said give to the Black Lives Matter protesters. They doing the same goddamn thing, tearing the city up.
Some of you messaging and say, well,
White
my
Lives
entire
Matter
community
is doing the
seems
same
to have
thing
just
as Black Lives
changed
Matter
over the past few years. But that's a legitimate...
Oh, man, look at it. I don't want to hear your white nationalist. I don't want to hear no more of your white nationalist concerns on my program, brother. Absolutely not. You a co-conspirator in this shit.
We just focus on what's happening here. This standoff, it's gone quiet just at the moment, but they keep rushing forward. We can hear the crowds just off camera. They're coming down.
Here you have White Lives Matter, extreme hardline nationalists. They on one side, and then on the other side, you have the police. You have the back, the blue. That's the police right there. They used to be buddies when it was all about beating us and kicking us and brutalizing us. They was all one big family when it came to brutalizing us. Now they're opponents right now.
Now with wheelie bins, they're masked, some of them. They are launching a wheelie bin on fire there. You can see launching it.
They are launching projectiles with fire. Any one of the officers could be set on fire. You could die by fire. So this is a deadly attack by White Lives Matter soldiers. And right here, live on TV, the whole world see it.
At the line of riot police there.
Look. Now this woman right here, you see? Now we just heard a lady say on the other channel, some of these people, they didn't know that it was going to be hardline radicals showing up here. So you're telling me this lady right here, this woman right here, she didn't know they was going to be throwing projectiles at the police?
There is a woman there. It's unclear if she's injured, but she is just being helped up by an officer. She's right in front of that wheelie bin, which is now on fire. There's more people coming with wheelie bins. People are filming it.
They said they got bins full of trash and they set it on fire. See, their ancestors used to do that in the war movies. You watch a war movie with the barbarians at the gates. They used to set stuff on fire. They're ramming the gates. Trying to get into the castle so they can pillage, plunder, and rape. You know what? They is conjuring the evil spirits of their ancestors right now with this little homemade Willie bin fire bomb they made for the police.
It and shouting aggressively at police.
That's being
taken off now by one of the officers. Another one being thrown in. These are on fire.
Look,
and
another Willie bin barrel bomb. Live on TV, Willie bin fire bombs are being thrown at the goddamn police. If those were black people, gunfire would have went off. Those cops would have open fire. They threw a deadly bomb. They would have told you they don't know what was in that bomb. It could have been filled with bricks. It could have been filled with bricks. It could have been explosives. You don't take, the officers got to protect the community, but right now they're standing down.
Earlier today, officials, the government, they said they didn't need to bring in the army. They can cope with this. They've got extra police on the street this weekend. But if you're living here, if you're one of these communities, it's very unsettling, it's very unpredictable, and it's very worrying. We've just walked down a street here and all the shutters are down. Usually on a Sunday, the community probably would have their doors open. You'd be able to go into cafes and shops. They are all completely shuttered down because they fear that what will happen here is what we've seen
those officers doing with that evidence? Come on, man. That's evidence. Don't fucking destroy the evidence. Cops just throwing it to the side. That is a fire bomb they just threw at y'all. Fingerprints. The hell do you see? Here we have some officers. They ain't on it. They're going to try to destroy that evidence.
Liverpool, Bristol, and other parts of the country. We can see here the lady being led away, looking quite defiant, actually, as a photographer grabs a picture of her.
Let's get a good look. Don't cry now. Don't you cry now, Antifa white nationalist, hardliner. You just threw a barrel bomb at the police. You're going to get 15 to life for that. Terrorist?
But yeah, unsettling scenes here, isn't it? And things being thrown. We're just standing back at the moment because it's just been so sporadic. Another wheelie bin, and cheers as that wheelie bin is thrown into riot police. You can see
another wheelie bin fire barrel bomb. Look at the lady. Another wheelie bin. Lady, you getting excited as they white Al Qaeda, White Lives Matter is throwing bombs at the police?
The atmosphere, it is so tense,
they still ain't fired no
so
shots yet.
fraught and volatile. And that woman that was led away is now being put in a police van at the moment. But, police saying, please do not come into the town centre at the moment.
Still ain't through no shots.
Charlotte, look, we're going to stay with these pictures because, as you rightly point out, we are seeing the disorder in front of our eyes play out currently in the centre of Middlesbrough. The police seem to be holding the line there, and as you say, it looks like a standoff, but those wheelie bins may well continue to be thrown at the police. Just give us the background as to how this particular rally, protests, whatever they're describing it as, started. And if you can, Charlotte, can you situate as to where we are and where the rest of the protesters are? Have we got any sense as to how many are out there, where they're trying to get to, if possible?
Yeah, well, we're near the cenotaph, actually, which is where it started at 2:00. And just to the left of your screens is an area there. So we think there are a few there, dozens of people just there, dozens of people down the street where those wheelie bins came from. So it started as a protest. They said it was peaceful. It was advertised online as a pro-British peaceful demonstration. They said there would be a march. They said it was to stand together, solidarity. They were worried about knife crime. They were worried about immigration levels. And so they were having this. They said it was pro-country, pro-family. So that started at 2:00, a couple of speeches, and then they marched quite quickly into the town centre. And on the way down, this is where we saw the scuffles. We saw the police van attacked. We saw somebody arrested and bundled into the back of a van. Once they were down there in the centre near the town hall, that is when they quickly dispersed. They went in different directions. So the police were sort of scrambling, chasing, trying to find them. And this is where we've ended up with the majority of the protesters. We've got this standoff, a bit like Liverpool yesterday. There was a standoff for a couple of hours. And yeah, at the moment, the police saying, you know, do not come into this area. Extremely worrying, as you can imagine, for the local people who live here. We've got people in flats just hanging out of their windows, looking very concerned, and some of the older generation who just said, we don't want this. We want cohesion, but there's certainly something at play, isn't there? You know, not only sort of the far right wing activists that we've seen in many of these protests. I think also, especially in Liverpool, people I spoke to, there's an underbelly of people who are just feeling unhappy. They're feeling worried about knife crime. They're feeling worried about social cohesion and the wait for public services. So there's a lot going on which the government will need to tackle, I suspect, pretty quickly, not only in the practical terms of policing and stopping this criminal behaviour, but also looking at ways that they can mend these communities, because there are a lot of unhappy people. But here, we're certainly getting that impression that it's a minority here now who are stoking up trouble. No more wheelie bins at the moment, but, you know, there are people masked, as you can see, you know, standing there in front of the riot police, in front of the shields, looking for trouble and biding their time, it looks like. But yeah, strong number you can't quite see in vision at the moment down the side streets and just in front of the cenotaph.
Just looking at this, what I think is the flyer that was put out, as you rightly describe it, Charlotte, that's what they put on there, pro-British. It says, bring flags, friends and passion. And then use the word never surrender. I'm not quite sure what throwing wheelie bins at police has to do with that. And while you've been in the town centre, Charlotte, have you heard any of the protesters? Have they been willing to speak to the media, to journalists, and sort of give voice to why they've decided to take to the streets today and why they've decided to, you know, get themselves into this standoff?
Well, it's a bit like Liverpool yesterday, a very similar sort of sentiment. They think there's a two-tier policing system. They think they've been ignored and neglected for too many years. They're wondering, you know, where they see it as a rise in knife crime. They say they want to protect their children, and they are not seeing the authorities supporting them. They say they're being left too long, ignored, their voices are not being heard. And this is how they say their voices will be heard. I mean, they said the voices will be heard through protests, but then it keeps descending into this disorder, doesn't it, and unrest, which is then sort of putting a very negative spin on what they're trying to achieve here. But they've said they're very shaken by those incidents on Monday, those stabbings, and they just don't see anything changing. They don't think that the Prime Minister, the government, is listening to them. They don't think the local authorities are listening to them. And so, you know, this is the way they say their voices are going to be heard. They say the police are too heavy-handed. So this is, and we've just got a brick coming towards us here now, but we have got our safety equipment on. Yeah, so the bricks are starting again. But yeah, that seems to be the sentiment of people, that they are not being listened to, that society is not what it should be, and there is this two-tier system, and they feel like they are forgotten and being neglected.
Wanted to divide them, they wanted to separate us. So we look divided.
For years, we've been told that grassroots political movements are the future. Community activism, the way forward. Empowerment of working people, a necessity if we're going to get meaningful change. But now, thanks to globalism, one of the consequences of which appears to be mass migration, there are movements, new movements, that appear to be getting incredible traction. In my country, the UK, there was a massive march that seems to be a kind of Britain first, England first march. Let's together talk about this movement, its figurehead, Tommy Robinson, and work out, is this a movement that can change Britain, change British politics? And is it a movement that is motivated by love or hate? Because certainly the legacy media will tell you this, that these movements are hateful, that they are racist. Some of you might have seen Tommy Robinson on Jordan Peterson and heard his biographical take on why he has the feelings and experiences he's had coming out of Luton, with its complexity and with the challenges that have come with a community that houses both white English, black English, and Muslim people. It's an interesting story, and you can check that out for yourself. Certainly, the march over the weekend got a lot of support. There was a counter march, and the counter march was, of course, an anti-racist march. But I'm wondering this: is it possible to be anti-racist, pro-community, pro-religious freedom, pro-English values, pro the working class people that built a country, and anti-establishment power that benefits from division and uses that division to turn people of different religious and cultural identities against one another? Let's have a look at this story together.
Got to be weary. We know people have used country and God and religion to kill our people, murder our people, take people's shit, burn down places like Black Wall Street. But it was Black Wall Streets all over America that they did that to. Maybe 13, 14 Black Wall Streets was burnt down over God. And this is the white man's land, and they're taking from us, and we used to live better. Any excuse that some bigots can come up with. These people got a king.
Are people allowed to be patriotic? Are people allowed to be nationalistic? Are people allowed to be proud to be British or American or Pakistani or French? Or do you think that one of the projects of globalism is to create a kind of sense of disorientation when it comes to national and cultural identity? If it's important to preserve the identity of Japanese people or Swahili people or people in Iceland or in various communities across nations, wherever you go in the world, do English people have a right to preserve and conserve their identity? And is there a way of doing that that doesn't necessarily involve invective, vitriol?
The problem with that, and he being deceptive, when you say, well, do English people, what English people are you talking about? Because once again, the United Kingdom and these so-called English people, it's several different tribes. Several different tribes. So what are they talking about? And they have, once again, they have to blame themselves for being conquerors that wanted to conquer the world and interact with most of the damn world up under them, and they're women, and and they're watering down their own so-called Anglo-Saxon nature, and all this English people, like the British family are Germans themselves. Like this, it's just, I mean, the royal family in Britain are Germans, so this is all bullshit, and they brought a lot of this shit on themselves.
Vitriol and hatred. Tommy Robinson has long been a controversial figure in this country, emerging out of Luton with all of its challenges, which I suppose come from, like, there's a strong Muslim community there. By Tommy Robinson's testimony, there were grooming gangs and there were sort of drug dealing affiliated Pakistani derived gangs there. And it seems like it was a pretty fraught place to grow up. That's Tommy Robinson's take on that. My personal feeling is that, and I felt this for a long while, it's one of the issues that I've sort of paid attention to long before I got into this space, is that if there was ever a way that Muslim communities living in this country and indigenous, whether white or black, communities in this country were able to get along locally, communally, and peacefully, we would have an incredible resource and force to oppose establishment power. I say that aside from, adjacent yet tangential issues like grooming gangs, which is obviously disgusting and appalling, drug dealing, which is plainly illegal, and race-based violence. So, you know, these are all crimes and issues for which we already have legislation. This is Tommy Robinson's video from that day. Have a look.
What a feeling. Huh? Most hated man in Britain. All your lives didn't work. And the best thing is, we're unifying the people. Exactly what you wanted to stop. You wanted to divide them. You wanted to separate us. So we look divided. Come on. Back up, mate. Back up. Come on.
Is he allowed to be a nationalist? Is he allowed to be proud to be British? Is he allowed to stand up for his community and his community's values? And indeed, if you are a person that's approaching this issue from, I suppose, the kind of takes that I've only ever seen in the legacy media, is that inherently hateful? Certainly seems to me something that we are going to have to investigate and better understand, because in order for ordinary people to have a voice, leaders are going to have to come up from those communities. And in order for these movements to succeed, we're going to have to become pretty adept and deft at handling the idea that different cultural identities are going to have to operate together. I wonder where the protection of borders and patriotism ultimately leads. When does the preservation of a culture become the rejection of another culture? When does the right to express yourself freely become the oppression of the rights of others to express themselves freely? And again, I'm talking outside of the criminal issues that I listed a minute ago: grooming gangs, drug dealing, all those things are sort of public order and legal issues that should be sort of controlled in the ordinary way, regardless of whatever race or group is practicing them. What's this little aspect of the Tommy Robinson story? He's fled the UK. He does get arrested a lot, this dude, doesn't he? He got arrested in Canada. He's getting arrested in the UK. I feel like he went to prison without trial for a little while because of what was it? It was some sort of contempt of court issue or subjudiciary when reporting on a grooming gang, I think in Rochdale. I'm not entirely sure. I should check my facts there, but this is a story right out of the legacy media. Tommy Robinson fled Britain on Sunday night to put himself beyond the reach of authorities in the UK, where he was due to be in court over alleged contempt proceedings, the hearing was told. The far-right activist was arrested on Sunday at the Eurotunnel terminal in Folkestone by police who used counter-terrorism powers, but was released on unconditional bail. Robinson was due to appear in court on Monday, accused of contempt of court for making a documentary, Silence, which I happen to know because I saw him talking about it, is about a case where a migrant kid and some British kids got into some kind of spats, and he feels like the information was managed and manipulated. Pretty interesting story. Again, this is the same when I'm talking about wars that are highly contested and incendiary. Is there a way to hear all sides of a story and bring about some peaceful solution? Or are we going to continue to double down saying, Muslims are all perverts and disgusting, or white English people, or English people, generally working class and of a variety of racial identities, don't have a right to a voice? Going to be some interesting conversations in the coming years, I would imagine, particularly if we are to oppose the centralized interests and authorities that benefit from Muslim communities and non-Muslim communities being in conflict. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat? Remember, like and subscribe.
Race riots, attempted pogroms have erupted in England and in Belfast in the north of Ireland. Cities are on fire, mosques under siege, and mobs of young white men and women are roaming around looking for anyone of color. that they can assault a mob smashed into a Holiday Inn hostel in Rotherham and attempted to set the hotel on fire at the risk of hundreds of lives. A man-made Grenfell, another man-made Grenfell. And Netanyahu has taken to his bunker. It seems like tonight is the night that the great pan-Middle Eastern war begins, and that might be the harbinger of World War III. We'll be diving deep into that. The attempt at a fascist coup to overthrow the elected government in Venezuela has failed, and the masses of the Chavista Bolivarian movement have taken back control of the streets from the US-paid mercenaries. And 300 days in Gaza, nothing changes. Another genocidal assault on a number of schools sheltering women and children, and more fires in the tent cities that have become the only shelter for the Palestinian people there. A woman watched her child roast in a blazing fire in her own tent and could do nothing about it. Hell on its way? We'll discuss it tonight because it's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say?
That they can find attempted lynchings, people being dragged from their cars and ruthlessly beaten, people being stabbed, mosques being besieged, having to be defended by non-Muslim well-wishers and the Muslim congregations within. The police are often nowhere to be found. I don't say that as an attack on them, not entirely in any case. I have vivid memories and can still feel the batons of the miners' strike of 1984-85 when to crush 250,000 of Britain's coal mining community, the entire resources of the state were mobilized and the miners were beaten, bludgeoned into submission. There was no shortage of police then. Every time we showed up at a picket line, we were virtually outnumbered by the massed ranks of Britain's finest in the constabulary. How different the Britain we live in today. People are dragged out of their cars by mobs of youths draped in the St. George's Cross, who's Turkish, by the way, some say even Palestinian, dragged out of their cars and set upon. People have been stabbed. There are stories of people having acid thrown at them. You don't have to look in the crystal ball. You can
look at attacking the brother
listen
right
to
there.
the videos. The videos taken by
I've seen that. I told you right now, they trying to lynch a brother right in the street.
The thugs themselves, as they say things, women, by the way, say things like, let them all burn, what the F do I care, as men burst in through the doors and the windows and set fire
brother was,
to a hotel full of hundreds of people, some of whom believed, that's all I can say, believed to be refugees. There are 0.18% of the people in Britain are refugees. It is a problem, and I myself have adumbrated that problem on here many times at some personal and political cost. We in the Workers' Party disagree with mass immigration. We believe that it beggars the country from which they've come and depresses living standards in the countries that they arrive. We want all refugees to be able to go back to their homes, which is why we say we should stop making war, invasion, exploitation, and occupation are the handmaidens of the great refugee flows that have occurred across Africa and Asia and the Middle East over this last 25 years or so. But there are some things that are non-negotiable. And the most important of those non-negotiable terms is this. We will not tolerate pogroms in England or in Wales or in Northern Ireland. There haven't yet been any attempts in Scotland, but no one should rest on their laurels about that. We will not allow anyone in this island to be treated as a subhuman, because especially people of my age who grew up in the shadow of the Second World War, we know where the subhumanization of people ends up in the gas chambers at Birkenau, at Auschwitz. We know that genocide is the end of the road for subhumanization of other people. What's non-negotiable is that the legal rights, civil rights, human rights of every single person in this island are exactly the same, however they came here, whenever they came here, whatever color they are, and however they pray or don't. That's not negotiable. And so the state has a responsibility, an equal responsibility, to defend the lives, to defend the property, to defend the livelihood, to defend the human right to worship. Every person in this island has exactly the same rights. And the state, which I was brought up to believe was in the final analysis an armed body of men, well, where are the armed bodies of men, is what I am asking. It's true that successive governments dramatically reduced the number of police officers that we have in this country. It's also true that they're not as tall or as fit as the police officers we used to face during the miners' strike in 1984-85. Some of them look like Diddy men that would not be able to confront an angry, tight-fisted fascist in the streets of Rotherham, Middlesbrough, or wherever else is kicking off right now. But that's not their fault. It's successive governments that have closed almost all police stations. Our police stations now look like Greg's, the baker, and several of them are now on fire or have been burnt out. The police were not even able to defend their own police stations. The police are doing their level best. I have every reason to believe that.
That brother throwing them hands. That brother throwing them hands, he beating them up. And then the other thug tried to jump in and hit him from the back.
The fire brigade, which is now involved in fighting fires caused by these racist, fascist
Get your ass kicked.
mongers that are roaming the whole country, it seems, but particularly in the north of England. The police are doing their best to protect people. They're doing their best to suppress these rioters, but there's just not enough of them. Neither has the Prime Minister or the government shown any leadership at all. I begged the question a couple of days ago, will Keir Starmer outlast Liz Truss as Britain's Prime Minister, or even a lettuce in the lifestyle, the life cycle of a lettuce? And for
that's really crazy, because them black people in Britain do not deserve to be fearing for their life right now as fascists walk through the streets hollering and yelling and screaming and shit. That's ridiculous. And they need to stand up like men and protect their communities. And the brothers don't need to be out there by themselves slipping like that, because you definitely can get roughed up right now. It's just in the air.
48 hours, I began to doubt that he would. He has now surfaced and he has now spoken, but it was too little and too late, and it did not address the underlying and fundamental problem which exists here. The reason that the abandoned cities and towns of the north and the entirely bereft coastal communities with nothing left, no tourists, no business, no industry, no employment, no hope, filled, their adrenaline running, fueled entirely on anger and alienation. The blame for that lies with our political class. It's a uni-party, it's a duopoly, it's two sides of the same backside. So I'm not making a particularly anti-Labour or a particularly anti-conservative point here. For 40 years, Britain has been governed by the blancmange of centrism. Neither one thing nor the other, neither conservative nor socialist. It has governed a Britain which has begun in front of our eyes to wither away. Trust in our institutions has withered away. If it's on the BBC, people don't believe it. If a policeman tells you what to do, you simply don't do it, and you might, if you have a brick handy, hit him over the head with it. Our courts, our parliament, above all, our whole system is broken. Britain is broken. And that's under the apparently never-ending rule of centrism. And that has left
Russia just
a lot
laughing at the
of
West.
dry and despairing human tinder all over the north of this country. It's not so much that they are poor. They certainly don't need to break into Phones R Us in order to liberate the phones as they've been doing. They don't have to break into shoe shops to be properly shod. They don't have to break into the clothes shops that they are now busily looting. I'm not suggesting that kind of poverty. I'm talking about the poverty of hopelessness, the poverty of alienation. And just like, and this for American viewers, please don't be offended, just like the poor whites down in Alabama, the poor whites down in Mississippi, for these people, the only thing, the only spiritual, moral thing that they have in their lives is that they're not black, that they're not brown, that they're not Asian. They can look down on somebody in the way that the British state and its liberal, progressive bubble looks down on them. They've got somebody else that they can look down upon, even though those communities very often have far more in terms of material, spiritual, familial, community, health, and happiness than they do. They still imagine that white is right, that white is might, that the people that look like them are somehow the master race. I'm afraid that's what's happening here in Britain. These hopeless, alienated
White Lives Matter is on the attack,
roaming around looking for people who don't look like them to set upon. And it's only a matter of time before this becomes a real pogrom. I said this 72 hours ago. People said I was exaggerating. But it's only for the grace of God that someone has not yet been literally hanged. Someone has not yet been literally burned to death in these riots that are happening now. Of course, riots go up like a rocket. They come down like a burned stick, and so will this one. And Starmer meant it. I'm sure he is a former chief prosecutor after all, when he said that they will regret having taken part in this disorder. They will be sent to prison for many, many years. That is to say, if they're treated in the same way that the mainly black people who rioted in Britain in 2011 were treated, or the mainly Asian people who rioted in Bradford several years before that. If they're treated like they were treated, of course, we must expect that, mustn't we? Then they will be in prison for many, many, many years. Their leader is sunning himself, sniffing cocaine in a Cyprus hotel right now. Yes, I refer to Stephen Laxley Yennon, or whatever his name is. Tommy Robinson, he'll be better known to you. He's literally in a Cypriot hotel by a swimming pool, sniffing coke at your expense. You idiot, far-right thugs who keep him in the style to which he has become accustomed. He lit the torch and ran away, fled out of London, and is now, he hopes, out of reach in Cyprus. I have a feeling that he'll be back to face the music pretty damned quick. But these people will go to prison for many years. They will never work. It'll be on their records, their personal records for the rest of their lives, that they set upon a person just because he was black, that they let a car go through just because the driver was white, and they molested, if not abducted, the driver who was black or who was brown. Now, the failure of the police to control this situation, the absence of the British Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, where's she? We understand that the Prime Minister is on a much-needed holiday. And then
my God, we're breaking it down to you what's happening. No other news station is going to be telling you what he's saying. That's why I tell you it's class civilizations, and they definitely looking for people to lynch right now. They're the White Lives Matter angry fucking mob.
In any case, he knocks off work on a Friday at 6 o'clock to observe the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath. We understand that. But it's now Sunday night, and there's no sign of any government rallying of the forces of the state to confront what's happening in Britain today at all. Where's the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner? She doesn't knock off on a Friday at 6 o'clock. Far as we know, she's not on holiday, but we haven't seen or heard anything from her. So in the absence of the state and an armed body of men to protect the communities and the individuals that are now at mortal risk, the people are beginning to organize themselves. Now, I have never called for that. I did not want that to happen.
They better organize themselves or get brutalized.
But if you were a Muslim in Blackburn, if you were a Muslim in Bolton, where there are tens, scores of thousands.
All those black British men over there who I see on YouTube and all that, talking tough, acting tough, the Nation of Islam, they got a group over there, red, black, and green, y'all over there, Hebrew Israelites, they over there too. But they need to be standing up straight. We see what these white radicals are doing. They better not be running off and hiding and all that shit. They better face this shit head on.
Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands across both towns and cities. Would you sit in your mosque waiting for a non-existent police presence to defend you? Would you stay in your home when a firebomb might come through the window at any minute? Or would you organize yourselves and your brothers to defend your community, to defend your families? Well, I'm afraid it's kind of obvious. It's not rocket science. That is what is now
like in
happening.
1912.
So, Britain, this green and pleasant land, is facing the possibility of large rival groups of attackers and defenders running into each other and pouring more petrol onto the flames. As I say, you can't blame those communities for defending themselves when it appeared that Britain was no longer able, or perhaps was no longer prepared to defend themselves. So much for Britain.
The police
a much bigger fire is coming tonight. It surely will be tonight. It's a surprise it wasn't last night. It's a surprise it wasn't the night before, because the delay has allowed the United States, the United Kingdom, Jordan, Egypt, the UAE, and all the other allies of Israel to rally to its defense. So it cannot be much longer delayed. We're promised from both Tehran and from the Lebanese resistance movement a retaliation of an entirely new kind. I have some ideas about what that might look like. It might, for example, look like the liberation of the illegally occupied Golan Heights, stolen from Syria in 1967 and occupied by Israel, annexed by Israel ever since. An annexation, an occupation, recognized by absolutely nobody in the world, except Donald Trump, who has a block of flats there called Trump Heights, named in his honor. It might look like a ground invasion of the Galilee. It might look like the actual liberation of parts of occupied Palestine for the first time since 1948 and the original Nakba catastrophe, which sent 800,000 Palestinians spinning into orbit right across the world and settling as refugees, lucky ones in the West and the North, unlucky ones in the refugee camps in the Arab countries nearby. It might look like a ballistic surprise for Israel that it has as its worst nightmare. You see, both Israel and Iran can now be said to be undeclared nuclear weapon powers. Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons. It has never acknowledged them. They have never been inspected. No one in the world, no government in the world even mentions it. We only know about it because the brave Jewish whistleblower, Mordechai Vanunu, told us about it in Andrew Neil's Sunday Times, and has spent the last quarter of a century and more in solitary confinement and imprisonment of various kinds. He's allowed out now, but he's not allowed to go anywhere, and he's not allowed to speak to anybody. But now we know, I personally thought I knew for the last few weeks, Iran has nuclear weapons too. And from their point of view, why shouldn't they? Everyone targeting them is a nuclear weapons power. Britain is a nuclear weapons power. France is a nuclear weapons power. The US is a nuclear weapons power. And Israel is a nuclear weapons power. So now there is nuclear parity between Iran and Israel. I don't think the Iranians are, in the first instance, going to target a nuclear weapon at Tel Aviv, but I'm certain that they're going to target a ballistic missile, the ferocity and velocity of which has never been seen in any Middle Eastern war. And I think it's going to land right down the middle chimney of the Israeli Knesset. I believe that the bunker that Netanyahu is presently, right now, sitting in will probably be the only safe place in the whole of the so-called state of Israel. Only place it'll be safe to be. Palestine, I just can't get out of my mind the video that I saw this evening of a woman screaming as her child roasted in a blazing tent outside a hospital. I can't get out of my mind the never-ending stream now of hundreds of thousands of maimed, mutilated, murdered children and women being dragged out of burning buildings, being recovered from under the rubble, being carried into hospitals no longer worthy of the name. So destroyed, so enfeebled have they become. 300 days of this, and nobody in the West in power gives a single damn about it. It's going to be a bumpy night tonight, and if there's breaking news, we'll certainly bring it to you. Remember, it's 2 hours later in Palestine than it is here in the UK. Stay tuned. I'll be right back with the one and only Bryce Green. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the kind of thing that we used to cluck about happening. To call us from the US and Canada, +1 8449 65522, and the number for the rest of the world is 44203966225. Bryce Green, a regular guest of ours, a very popular one too, is an independent writer, political analyst, contributor to Fairness. Wouldn't fairness be a fine thing? Bryce, you were probably startled by my description of what's happening in England today because, well, it's the kind of thing that we used to cluck about happening in the United States. Race riots in 2024 in England. Has that news reached you over there yet?
I've only heard the briefest accounts, but it doesn't surprise me that Britain would be having race issues. The entire Brexit campaign seemed to be an example of capitalizing on racial discrimination and racial biases against immigrants and people of color. And this is nothing less than what I would expect from one of the chief countries of what I like to call the white power axis. You know, UK, the United States, and Australia, and all these other European countries that are hell-bent on taking over the world.
Actually, the free movement of foreign labor that was being rejected by the vote on Brexit were all white people. So whatever else it was a rejection of white Eastern European cheap labor, not of people of color. There are millions of people of color in our country. Most of them were born there. And if they weren't in the England football team, they'd have gone out in the first round. Everyone is eating in Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi restaurants, listening to black people's music. And every football team in Britain, everyone in England has at least 2, 3, oftentimes 7, 8 black players in their team. And yet the same people that eat in those restaurants, buy that music, support those football teams, are now roaming around English cities looking for people who look like you to pull out of their car and severely assault. And God forbid, it's only a matter of time before somebody's killed. It's a truly shocking thing for us in Britain. And the fact that we don't have enough cops to defend the places that are under attack is a big wake-up call, a big shock to those that didn't notice the steady reduction in police numbers in Britain over this last period. But you've got your border issues too, don't you? You had a border czar, Kamala Harris, I think she was called. What's happening down there?
Well, here in the United States, it seems that immigration has become a bipartisan issue in which everyone on every side of the aisle agrees that they want to keep the immigrants out. But the immigration crisis is one born of American imperialism, just like many other issues around the world. The fact that America has destroyed countries like Mexico, like Honduras, like Nicaragua, like Venezuela through sanctions or other forms of economic warfare has caused a steady stream of migrants headed northward looking for a better life. But the Americans don't seem to care about that. They seem to only care about the issue when it reaches their borders. But if they wanted to stem the tide of immigrants, they could stop destroying other countries. And Kamala, even if she might be offering an alternative to Joe Biden, seems pretty committed to continuing America's role in Latin America, America's role in the rest of the world. One only need look at the recent elections in Venezuela to see how this political system would react to any radical change that would change the conditions of people's lives on the ground in Central America. The Maduro government appears to have won an election, but of course, Western imperialist powers have been delegitimizing the election, which is what they do whenever an election happens in a country that they don't like. But much like they did under Trump, the U.S. government seems to be trying to recognize the other government, thus contributing to the political destabilization, justifying another round of economic sanctions, which compounds the political situation there. None of this is going to help Venezuela. None of this is going to keep people from wanting to come north. All of it's going to exacerbate the problem. And when people flee in millions and millions, they'll act surprised when they decide to come to America, which, for all its problems, is still a relatively rich part of the world.
It is ironic, isn't it, that a state founded on the mass immigration of settlers who then exterminated the local population, enslaved millions of Africans, should be complaining about invaders coming from the south, given everything you've just said. And I could say even more about the war and depredation they have wrought upon their backyard, as Monroe put it, in the southern part of the American hemisphere. It's as ironic as Britain, which invaded 3/4 of the world. Only 40 countries in the whole world that Britain has not invaded and occupied, and for centuries in some cases, and was, of course, the biggest trader of slaves to the Americas. Now we're all upset about 0.18% of our population being invaders who've arrived here illegally, like we legally arrived in India or Africa or Asia or the Middle East.
Oh, precisely. It is exactly irony that's what's at play here. One of the funny things, George, is that when I was in elementary school, middle school, learning about our history, we would learn about the Monroe Doctrine. And in America, the Monroe Doctrine is taught to us as a way to protect the Southern Hemisphere or the Western Hemisphere from European colonialism. There was no mention of American colonialism. There was no mention that the fact that the U.S. is claiming all of these countries is a way for them to exploit their resources and change the governments and extract as much wealth as possible. But that's the sort of history that people are grown up with. And so it's no surprise that they have these skewed ideas about whose land it is and who's an invader and who belongs here. And I'm certain that the educational system over there in the UK is equally as skewed towards, again, this white power axis. These narratives of whose land it is and who's in the right. And well, do Indians belong here? Did Britain legally go into India? All of these questions have real historical answers, but educational systems in many countries around the world spend a lot of energy in trying to obscure this reality and in trying to play on people's nativist sentiments. And I think based on what you're telling me, that's what we're seeing in the UK right now, these roving gangs of the ignorant fighting the enemy that they've been told is replacing them. But it's all nonsense, and it's all based on the original sin of the colonialist empire.
That's a fact.
Now, are your people aware that tonight probably a conflagration will begin and that your government, whoever they are, we don't actually know who's running things in Washington right now, your government has sent 4,000 Marines, sent your warships to the Eastern Mediterranean, which can only mean an intervention in the war that's about to break out overnight tonight.
It's not enough to say nothing.
Are the American public aware that their sons and presumably some daughters
they're not aware.
Steaming towards their own death for Israel, and how do they feel about it?
Well, as usual, most of the American public doesn't quite understand what the issues at stake are. They understand that Israel's under attack and that Israel is an ally, and so America needs to defend their ally. However, what's little discussed here is just how precarious the situation in the Middle East is, and just how destructive Israel's role in the Middle East is. People don't see the fact that Israel, in its entire colonial enterprise and its entire enterprise of occupation in Gaza and the West Bank, is at the root of the current war that we see now. They don't see that Israel's insistence on expansion into the Golan Heights, into the West Bank, into other areas, is why the surrounding Arab states don't approve of their continued aggressive behavior. And they certainly don't understand how endangered Israel is right now. There's this myth that Israel is an iron fortress backed by Big Brother, the United States, but that seems to be increasingly blowing up in their face. Many Israeli generals seem to understand that they can't really fight a war on two fronts against Hezbollah and Hamas. They're only recently now acknowledging the ammunition and tank shortages that have been resulting from their war against Hamas. Those challenges will only be compounded when 30,000 Hezbollah fighters are up against the IDF. And those problems will only be further compounded if Iran sends troops to get involved. And again, they'll be further compounded if the Houthis decide to send more missiles, which, as we've seen over the last few weeks, are very capable of hitting Tel Aviv. And so there's this myth of American invincibility, of Israeli invincibility, and it's slowly being shattered. But if America allows Israel, and I do say allow because they have the ability to stop it, but if America allows Israel to start this broader war in Lebanon and Iran, and to continue bombing sovereign nations, then they're in for a rude awakening. It seems to be another example of this irony we're talking about, this ignorant irony, that the biggest people who are pushing for an agenda that would lead to the destruction of Israel happen to call themselves Israel's biggest supporters. They happen to be the settlers, the ultra-ideological Zionists who are pushing for a broader expansion into war. But as we've seen in the case of South Africa or any dying empire, lashing out this way is really the surest path to destruction.
Lastly, Bryce, I'm grateful for your time on a busy, busy evening. How's the election going? What's your current reading of who's going to be president?
Oh, goodness. I'm not following the horse race as closely as many people, mostly because I don't find the difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to be as significant as some other people seem to believe. There was a time when the Democrats were talking about how Trump is a threat to democracy and a threat to the rule of law. Of course, all of that's true, but they don't seem to believe that anymore. They seem to be getting highly offended at the idea of someone wishing death on Trump, which if they were a threat to democracy, well, then you would think that that wouldn't be so controversial. But no, they pivoted from calling Trump a threat to democracy to him being weird and Republicans being weird, which again is true, but it ignores how much of a threat to democracy Democrats are and how weird Democrats are. And so while I am on the side that believes that Kamala Harris would be far less destructive, or at least slightly less destructive than Trump would be, at least on the domestic front, the differences between the two, especially on the foreign policy side, in which millions of lives hang in the balance, in which thousands of people are being massacred every year under the U.S. watch, that doesn't seem to change under Kamala. It didn't seem to change under Biden, and it won't change under Kamala. Didn't change under Obama. Didn't change under Clinton or any Democrat. And so these issues of which person is in the White House at any given moment seems to be secondary than to the question of who controls American foreign policy. And that question is, the major corporations, the ideologues, the imperialists, the people who want to see American power projected at any cost. And that's true regardless of the color of the party that's in office, blue, red, it doesn't matter. And so I believe that many Americans should instead focus on how they can build alternative power so that by 2028, we won't have a question of which genocidal freak we're going to put into the White House. And maybe it'll be a question of whether or not this country is going to be a democracy, whether or not it's going to represent its people, whether or not it's going to keep massacring people all around the world. And so that's the long-term political project that I think people ought to be focused on. The horse race might be interesting in its own right, but at the end of the day, it's just going to an office and clicking a button. It's not really political activity.
Thanks for that, Bryce.
In unconfirmed reports on August 4, 2024, that the Iranian military has deployed Murmansk BN long-range communications jamming system at several strategic locations in Iran. The surprising move came from Iran, which is expected to immediately carry out strategic retaliation following the high-profile assassination of Hamas political bureau chief, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran. Murmansk BN is Russia's most advanced electronic warfare system, the most powerful jamming communication system to disrupt enemy communications and radars. Previously, there were also unconfirmed reports that the Russian Il-76 aircraft, known for carrying heavy weapons, was seen for the first time flying from Moscow and landing in Tehran. It is known that Murmansk BN is a unique Russian jamming system, which has participated in operations in Ukraine. Engineers specially designed this system and installed it on 7 trucks with 32 meters high antennas to eliminate high-frequency military satellite communications with a range of up to 5,000 kilometers. A video in 2021 showed that Russia moved its most powerful Murmansk VN system near the border with Finland. Meanwhile, it seems that Murmansk VN in Iran is in anticipation of a possible US-Israeli attack. It will intercept and disable communications by ground forces and aircraft, as well as high-level enemy warplanes, especially Israel with full US support, which raises concerns about potential military action in the fragile Middle East region.
Here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, August 2nd, 2024. It's the end of the day. It's the end of the week. It's everybody's favorite time for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the Intelligence Community Roundtable on Judging Freedom with Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. It's been a while since we were together. The last time we were together, I was in a hotel room in Lake Como, and the assassination attempt on Donald Trump was fresh in the news. Larry, what is the latest thinking on whether or not this 20-year-old acted alone?
As far as the shots that day, yes, he's the one that fired the shots. As far as having any prior assistance, encouragement, support from other people, still up in the air. There's some very legitimate questions about it. The failure by the Secret Service is so profound and so pervasive that, and I'm basing this upon a friend of mine who ran Ronald Reagan's Secret Service detail after Reagan was shot, not before. So he had an unblemished record with Reagan, and also ran the training division for a while. He said the depth of these mistakes and the oversights, the failure to follow procedures, it's almost as if it was deliberately done to create a situation where someone could do this to Donald Trump.
Are you still of the belief, Larry Johnson, that this was a high degree of negligence? Or do you believe there was knowledge on the part of people in the government of what Crooks was up to?
I don't know. It's clearly negligence of the worst kind. The problem with it is, here's this guy Rowe, who's now the acting director. Well, he was the one prior to this that was making the decisions to cut officers off of Donald Trump's security detail. So this is worse than putting the hungry fox in charge of guarding the hen house. He's lied. He's misrepresented what's been going on, and he clearly failed to provide protection on January 6th. I mean, this guy has a record of working against Trump, and so you cannot rule out the possibility that he was helping create a situation that if Donald Trump gets killed, oh well, that's too bad. But the Secret Service on this one, they didn't even do the proper advance work. They didn't sit down and get the counter sniper team in place well beforehand so that they could determine where they needed to be situated in order to have the best line of sight and the best protection.
Right. And now we have the spectacle of the Pennsylvania state and local police being harshly critical of the Secret Service and the Secret Service attacking them. Ray, what is the consensus or scuttlebutt, whatever you want to call it, in the intelligence community over a failure of this magnitude? Are there any fingers being pointed?
Well, Judge, the default solution, of course, is incompetence, and that is understandable given the way our intelligence agencies, including our domestic intelligence agencies, and the other parts of our government, including the military, have screwed up royally. I don't buy it, okay? You have, as Larry said, the Fox investigating the chicken coop. There is no independent investigation here.
Right.
And I always look at motive. And sure, this young 20-year-old may have had a motive or may have been conditioned. But the real motive here is the people who stand to lose the most if Donald Trump is not killed before he becomes elected president. I say that advisedly. They wanted to kill him. My guess is they'll try again. And why is it? Well, the people that did him in, that almost prevented him from becoming elected and then emasculated him for 4 years, those are the same people he knows about now. They're the James Comeys, the John Brennans, the Jim Clappers, all these people who made up lies, which are proven lies now. So they have immense incentive to prevent this guy from becoming president again, lest they suffer the consequences, which he has already threatened. Retribution. He says it out loud, a retribution against intelligence people. So, yeah, call me suspicious, but when you look at what the FBI has done, for example, in not investigating properly the murder of Seth Rich, in not speaking out when 51, count them, former intelligence directors said Hunter Blacktops was a Russian intelligence disinformation operation 10 days before the last election. Look at the same guys, and they're still pulling the string. So, yeah, I'm suspicious. I don't buy that this guy did this all alone.
Here's our friend and colleague, Tony Schaefer, who's pretty harsh on this. It's a 60-second clip from yesterday.
I need to be careful here. The very elements he's outlining were known by the people who shot at Trump. That is to say that he's presenting essentially their operations plan for concealing this. Think about it. He's laying out how, oh yeah, we couldn't see him, this, that, and the other, but we still, he's telling you how they did it, Judge. He's taking and switching around the what they had done because they knew this would come up, and so they've had to conceal everything within the context of how they would commit themselves to protecting the president. That's what I'm telling you.
It says that Tony is of the view that the Secret Service was involved in this assassination attempt, and that Ronald Rowe is the guy who's lying under oath to protect them. Larry?
Yeah, it's possible. Look, this is akin. Let's say that you run an Air Force wing. Okay, you're in charge of having somebody fly the B-2 bomber, and so you decide, hey, we've got a very special mission today. We need to fly, and you're going to go select the person that's never flown the B-2 bomber to fly the bomber. Does that make sense? Because that's exactly what they did here. The agent that was in charge, she was the short, chubby that was out there. And there's nothing wrong with being short. There's nothing necessarily wrong with being chubby as long as you can run. Nothing necessarily wrong with being a woman if you're competent. But she wasn't competent.
Is this the woman that couldn't get the weapon out of her holster?
Yeah, apparently so. That's what I've been told. So she was the one that's supposed to be the agent in charge. She was the one that was supposed to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, ensure that everybody was talking to each other, to ensure that all the various teams were briefed, to ensure that the meetings were going on, to ensure that the security was, the perimeter was secure. Didn't do that. And one of the reasons she didn't do that, she had no experience doing it. So this was a case where I said, hey, let's let her do it because she's a woman, as opposed to say, hey, she's done 50 of these details. She knows how to do this better than anybody. That wasn't the case. So when your decision-making chain allow something like that to take place, and you put the pilot in the pilot's seat who's never flown the plane before and it crashes, whose fault is that? It's not necessarily the fault of the incompetent pilot, even though they were incompetent. It goes to the person who put the pilot in the seat.
Switching gears, Ray McGovern, what was your opinion of the manner in which Prime Minister Netanyahu was received by the Congress when he addressed them last week?
I'm going to get sick, Judge, if you insist that I continue. I was sickened by it, frankly. I was ashamed of all those representatives and senators that fawned. You know, maybe an analogy is apt here. I go back to the Soviet Union when I watched Soviet leaders give big speeches, okay? And I couldn't watch them live in those days, but they would appear on 3 pages of a 6-page Pravda. And every 4 paragraphs, there would be a parenthetical remark in italics. It would say, "Бурные аплодисменты, все стоят." Okay, burna, that's stormy. Stormy applause, everyone stands, okay? Now, my point is simply, that would maybe be every 8 paragraphs, so maybe 4 times in a big speech. It wasn't 53 times or whatever it was. These guys
58 times in a 55-minute speech, and one of them, try doing this, Larry and Ray, standing and applauding for a minute without stopping. See if your arms don't hurt.
Yeah.
One of them was for more than a minute.
And one of them, Netanyahu said, "Well, wait a second now, I'm not finished the paragraph," and he called off the applause until a minute later. So it was sickening. And what the impression it gave, of course, is Netanyahu comes home, he's greeted, "You did a great job." Now, what did they tell you? They told me I could do whatever the hell I want. And now we're seeing the results of that. Now we're seeing the assassinations. Now we're seeing Netanyahu wanting to go against Hezbollah, knowing that Hezbollah is going to give him a real fight, and thinking with some kind of assurance that in an election year, a U.S. president will be unable to do anything other than to send more warships to the Eastern Med and enter the fray militarily. That's what they're counting on. The only break on that, and the only break that I can see, is that the Israeli military have been chastened by what happened against Hamas. They don't want to go against Hezbollah. But, you know, if they say to the president, "Look, what happens if we get in trouble?" Netanyahu said, "Well, God, did you watch my speech before Congress? For God's sake." They're in 110% behind this. Blinken just told me so. And the president, well, he listens to Blinken.
Larry, what kind of military assistance would the United States provide if suddenly Hezbollah is clobbering the IDF?
We'd offer our marvelous air power. You know, the air power that stopped the Houthis? Oh, wait, that's right. Our air power couldn't stop the Houthis. So that's basically what we have to offer. Some cruise missiles off some ships and some bombs and missiles off of planes. And, you know, show me one engagement, one war in the last, 100 years where aerial bombardment has brought an end to it. When people say, "Oh, Hiroshima and Nagasaki," I don't even accept that. There are other things in play there. You know, we couldn't defeat Saddam Hussein's army despite our shock and awe campaign.
Colonel McGregor says that the jets would come from an aircraft carrier, and it's very, very easy to destabilize the aircraft carrier by attacking the deck. You don't have to sink it. You just have to render those airstrips on the carrier useless, and then the carrier itself is useless, and it's sitting there with 5,000 sailors in it.
Yeah, no, that's what that could be done with a drone swarm launched from, say, Cyprus, on the Turkish part of Cyprus.
We checked that out, Judge. Yesterday, I was at lunch with Matt Hogue. I asked him, how many carriers are left in the Med? He checked it out and could find 0.
Ooh.
0 aircraft carriers in the Med.
I wonder what Blinken and Sullivan promised Netanyahu if there are 0 aircraft carriers there.
Well, they were probably generic. Yeah, we'll support you. We got military up to kazoo,
Right.
you know. But they do have 3 Marine assault, not carriers, but something short of that are said today to be moving toward the Eastern Med. There you could get cumulative number of 5,000 Marines. I don't know if even, well, I can't say it. Blinken would be stupid enough to put the Marines in there.
Larry, would the American public tolerate Marines coming back in body bags over Netanyahu's problems with Hezbollah that he started?
I don't think the Marines are not going there to engage in combat. They're going there as what's called, it's the MU. It used to be called the Marine Amphibious Unit. Now it's the Marine Expeditionary.
Well,
unit.
what does that mean if it's not combat, Larry?
So what it means is they're going to go there to evacuate civilians. So with the air, right now, all the airspace in Israel shut down. So flights out of Ben Gurion aren't happening. So if you've got a bunch of American citizens and people that want to get the hell out of Israel if it's under attack, the only way to get them off is bring the Marines ashore with landing craft, load people up, haul them off to ships, and then take them off through maritime way. So that's, I think what we're seeing right now is when Netanyahu was in town, he fully briefed the U.S. on what his plans were, got firm commitments from the United States. In fact, Foreign Minister Katz said that they had assurances from both the United States and the United Kingdom. So Israel is fully intent on sparking this war with both Iran and Hezbollah, and they recognize that there may be some problems at home. And that's why these ships were being sent in advance. That's the thing to understand. This is proof that the United States knew about the assassination attempt that was going to take place against Haniyeh in Tehran. Because these ships you just don't call them up and say, like an Uber driver, hey, I'd like to order a pizza with pepperoni. Can you be here in 30 minutes? This took a few days to organize. So they knew in advance what this timeline was. That's why they started movement. And that's why there are additional 12 ships headed that way. One of them is a carrier.
What can the Brits possibly provide?
Air power. They're based on Cyprus. They've got in the Greek part of Cyprus, those British air bases. And that's one of the issues that Turkey's looking at, that if the Brits get involved and are involved from that side of Cyprus, Turks on the other side, they could get involved and maybe attack the Brits.
Well, the Turks, if they get involved, are certainly not going to be on the Israeli side. We know that, unless President Erdogan has zero credibility. How much longer can the war in Ukraine last, Ray? Before the intelligence community tells Joe Biden, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, whoever they ultimately report to, this is over. This is just not going to last another week.
Well, the intelligence community has not distinguished itself yet in telling these policymakers what the real score is. Over a year ago, they told the president to say that Putin had already lost in Ukraine. He had a disaster on his hands. And the head of the CIA said, the ineptitude of the Russian forces has been made clear for the whole world to see. Well, that was July of last year. What's going on now? Well, what are they telling them now? You have to remember that the head of the CIA now is a policymaker. He's in the cabinet. He's not only that, but he's negotiating.
He's the chief negotiator for America, is he not? Or is Amos Hochstein?
What's that?
Is Bill Burns the chief American negotiator, or is Amos Hochstein?
Well, he's one of the negotiators. He's one of the chief negotiators. What was the other? Hochstein? I don't think he's very much involved in hostage stuff. Anyhow, he shouldn't be. In other words, a CIA director should be able to say, look, I have no dog in this game, okay? I'm not going to glorify the chances that Netanyahu will finally capitulate, or at least show some flexibility on the hostage thing. And similarly, in Ukraine, where he's on record as saying, wow, the Russians have lost big time, how is he going to come and say to the president, if he's able to listen, or to Blinken and Sullivan, look, I was wrong. I was depending on what Austin told me. And Austin, you know, he's real good about massaging the intelligence he gets. He's got a record for that. And so Austin is telling us this stuff. We have no independent military analysis capability anymore. So yeah, we'll win finally. I don't know when they're going to tell the president or Kamala or whoever that this is over, but it really is not necessary right now because the Russians are proceeding in a very measured way, okay? Very measured way. There are enough of Ukrainian forces that will take the Russians several more weeks to attrit them into oblivion. And I think that Putin, perspicacious as he is, will probably avoid a big arrow offensive, as they call it, which would force a showdown before the election and, you know, just kind of muddy the waters in a way that it would not help anybody. So I think Putin's going to wait until November. He's pretty much said so. Nothing's going to happen before November. But meanwhile, there are stirrings, and there are people like the Ukrainian foreign minister trotting off to Beijing to ask the Chinese to please see if you get the Russians to loosen their terms, and maybe we'll talk. So there's great concern in Ukraine. And I believe that the Russians are just going to stick to their policy of attrition and see what happens once November comes and the election is gone.
Larry, before I ask you how much longer Ukraine can hold out, just a little bit for laughs, a little bit to raise your blood pressure. I don't know this fellow, but he's a retired British colonel by the name of Philip Ingram. Here's an interview he gave with a British radio station earlier this week.
It's costing them over 1,000 troops a day. You know, in the past 24 hours, the Russians have lost over 1,300 troops. They've lost over 28 artillery systems. They've lost over 12 tanks, and they're losing those sorts of numbers on a daily basis, and that is, frankly, unsustainable. No matter how big your military force is, no matter how capable it is.
I mean, you know, a fat British former colonel, you know, he's been sucking up his hasty pudding. Then the Brits can't even field a decent army. You know, name the last war the Brits won. Oh, that would be, well, yeah, they tagged along for World War II. Okay, they got a free ride with us. But I mean, it's, you know, all he's doing is taking the Ukrainian propaganda.
But in reality, he's a cheerleader for Kyiv. But in reality, how bad is it for Ukraine as we speak now, midsummer 2024?
They're suffering 2,000 casualties a day.
Wow.
Not the 1,000. So let's accept his numbers. Russia, with 140 million people, suffering 1,000 casualties a day. Ukraine, with 21 million people, suffering 2,000 casualties a day. Do the math. Who runs out first? Okay? So let's start with that. But to put this into proper context, do you realize that in our war in Iraq from 2003, let's say, through 2018, and our war in Afghanistan from 2001 through to 2021, the total number of U.S. KIA killed in action, less than 8,000 total. Now, I don't want to, if you lost somebody in that, that's, you know, that's immeasurable. But the reality is, during that same 20-year time period, you had about 14,000 people killed in gunfire in Chicago alone. So stop. So what we're doing is we're subjecting the Ukrainians to basically the number of casualties we suffered in 20 years, and they experience it in 3 days, 4 days. I mean, it's just, it's at a horrific scale. And the average American
Ray is of the view that this comes tumbling down after the American election day for obvious reasons. You know, Putin is an international geopolitical player. Do you accept that?
It could happen sooner than that. I think that there's no good ending to this. All right. because Ukraine's in the same position as the guy that goes sees his doctor, and the doctor says, "Got bad news for you. You got stage 4 liver cancer. There's no coming back from it." So is that going to be 2 months or 6 months? Who knows? But it's terminal. That's what Ukraine is.
Ray, do you think that the American public will be repulsed? I don't want to go into the details because it's disgusting, of these rapes of restrained Palestinian men by the IDF, by the Minister of Justice of Israel saying they shouldn't be prosecuted, by the police who allowed a jail break-in, and by the Knesset, which is on the verge of voting to immunize them from any prosecution, and at the same time to authorize them summarily to execute Palestinian prisoners with a bullet to the head on the theory that they need more room in the jails. Will the American public at some point, notwithstanding the power of the donor class and the iron grip they have on Congress, say enough is enough?
It's the media, not only the donor class and Congress. If we're talking about the U.S. public, it's the media. It's they that have the grip on these things. I could see the New York Times 2 months from now saying, well, they weren't really raping. They were just using broomsticks. That's all. More than that, this kind of thing just will be let peter away. What people more basically don't understand is that the world is against us, not because the world reads our major media, but because the world does know what's going on, does understand. They watch Al Jazeera, they watch Al Mayadeen, and they know all this stuff, okay? And so what's happening worldwide? Well, take Iran. Iran and Russia are this close to a very comprehensive cooperation treaty to renew from the old one, okay? They're going to sign that at BRICS in Kazan in October, okay? Who else is coming to BRICS? Oh, just today, the head of Venezuela's foreign ministry said, oh, we're delighted that Maduro has gotten a personal invitation from Vladimir Putin to come to BRICS in Kazan in October. The whole thing is being stacked in a no-rule way against the U.S., and they don't seem to realize that. The other thing is that Russia and China, and this is the tectonic shift, they are together as never before. You've heard me say that endless times before. But what does that mean? Well, they're doing joint exercises, air exercises for the first time ever up next to Alaska. They're doing them in the Baltic. They're doing the South China Sea. What they're trying to do is say, hey, Mr. Austin, for God's sake, look up and see what's happening. What does Austin say? Oh, we're not afraid of this. What we're really afraid, says Austin, is not that this is the first time they're doing this kind of infringement up there near Alaska, but the relationship that we're concerned about, and I'm reading from Austin's statement just 2 days ago, the relationship we're concerned about is that China is providing support for Russia's illegal and unnecessary war in Ukraine. That's according to Austin. Now, he said illegal and unnecessary. He said spare parts. He didn't say unprovoked and full-scale invasion like he usually does, but he's a cipher. And if Biden or Blinken and Sullivan are depending on Austin to make a sensible judgment on these things, including F-16s, are the F-16s going to fly out of an airfield in Ukraine? If they do, they're going to get shot down. There's ample reason to believe that in Peskov's wording yesterday, Peskov being Putin's spokesperson, Peskov said, we're going to destroy them as soon as they get to Ukraine. He didn't say we're going to shoot them down. He said we're going to destroy them. That allows them to destroy them on the airfield. And my guess is that's exactly what they do as soon as they see them there, and they will see them there almost as soon as they arrive. So we're in deep kimchi, and the American people don't know, but the rest of the world knows. And this BRICS meeting, when you mentioned the Brits before, I thought you were mentioning BRICS, because BRICS is going to have a hell of a lot to do with what happens in the world, and not least in Ukraine eventually.
You guys are both the salt of the earth, and I thank you very much for your intellect and your courage and your time spent with me.
One-third of the world is currently being sanctioned by the US government, with the United States imposing 3 times as many sanctions as any other country or international body. Just take a look at this chart, which shows a breakdown of active sanctions across the world. The United States leads by a large margin, with more sanctions than Switzerland, the EU, and the United Kingdom combined. US sanctions have become the de facto tool that every US president uses to discipline countries they don't like and unleash economic chaos. And as Washington Post author Jeff Stein wrote, sanctions can crush national industries, erase personal fortunes, and upset the balance of political power in troublesome regimes, all without putting a single American soldier in harm's way. But it leads us to a bigger question. How effective have these sanctions been, and what is the long-term effect of US aggression across the world? This graph is a fascinating look into how US presidents have used sanctions throughout their presidency. It starts with Bill Clinton, who incredibly removed more sanctions than he passed during his presidency, a remarkable feat when you consider what followed next. George Bush launched America's war in Iraq, and with it came aggressive sanctions in his fight against weapons of mass destruction. Obama followed with remarkable consistency, passing almost the same amount of sanctions each year in office, which prompted then Treasury Secretary Jack Lew to publicly warn about sanctions overreach and the risk that their overuse could ultimately reduce our capability to use sanctions effectively. However, the advice fell on deaf ears when Trump came into power, as he became the first president to pass over 2,000 sanctions in a single year, targeting China, Russia, and Venezuela, the latter which would come back to completely backfire on Trump. More on that in a moment. But then came along Joe Biden, who will go down in history as the American president who passed the most sanctions during a presidency, smashing Trump's records and issuing over 6,000 new sanctions within a 2-year span. Make no mistake, US presidents have become increasingly addicted to using sanctions. But what happens when they don't work? No better example can be found than the case of Donald Trump's sanctions against Venezuela. The goal of Trump's economic sanctions was simple: destroy the Venezuelan economy, create chaos, and install a coup government that favors the United States. But the sanctions have failed to oust Maduro and only resulted in Venezuela's economy shrinking the most of any country not at war in modern recorded history from 2012 to 2020. Just before Venezuela's election this year, John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, admitted to the Washington Post that he knew Trump's crippling sanctions and coup attempt against Venezuela would destroy its economy and force millions to flee. There is no doubt the sanctions, along with the general economic deterioration before we imposed them, was driving a lot of people out of the country. That, to me, was a way to put pressure on the country. Did any Venezuelans vote for John Bolton, Donald Trump, or Joe Biden to destroy their economy? What about Trump, who has made undocumented immigrants the cornerstone of his 2024 presidential run? Will he take responsibility for literally creating millions of them? In fact, US government officials aren't even hiding their intentions anymore. Check out this tweet from former US Ambassador Michael McFaul, who states, "If there's a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela, all sanctions will be lifted and the suffering of the Venezuelan people will end." It's a bold statement from the former ambassador, because he just admitted that it's US sanctions and not the Venezuelan government responsible for the economic hardships in the country. To make matters worse, these moves from the US government are completely illegal under international law, as this is textbook interference in other countries' internal affairs. In fact, if we look back through US history, sanctions have often fallen short of their stated goals. In Cuba, sanctions imposed by the United States more than 60 years ago have failed to overturn the communist government. But who has suffered the most? Of course, the common citizens of Cuba, who struggle to acquire critical medical supplies. In Iran, US sanctions started over 50 years ago with the goal of once again pushing out the government and forcing change. But fast forward to today, and Iran's government hasn't changed and only pushed Iran to forge close alliances with Russia and China. In Syria, Assad remains in power despite 20 years of US sanctions, but the country is struggling to rebuild from civil war, and more Syrians than ever are expected to need critical humanitarian assistance this year. If there is one stat I want you to remember from today's video, it's this. More than 60% of all low-income countries across the globe are now under some form of financial penalty from the US government. It's a remarkable figure and shows exactly why we now live in a multipolar world. If low-income countries are being sanctioned and facing economic warfare from the US government's addiction to imposing these sanctions, low-income countries will naturally look for other options. This is why we've seen China grow its influence throughout the globe, signing up over 150 countries to its signature Belt and Road Initiative. And these are not just low-income countries. Earlier this week, it was reported that Italy, who last year backed out of China's BRI, has now rejoined the alliance, with Italian Prime Minister Meloni personally flying to Beijing to meet with Chinese officials and sign a 3-year action plan to implement past agreements. Italy is certainly not a low-income country, and this change represents a larger geopolitical story that is currently unfolding, because while the majority of US sanctions are imposed against low-income and developing countries, the US government is now starting to target high-income countries and even its own allies. Last month, Bloomberg reported the Biden administration is considering using the most severe trade restrictions available if Japanese and Dutch companies continue to give China access to advanced semiconductor technology. This is quite a fascinating case study, so let's break it down. First, I want you to listen to the words of Eric Schmidt. He is the former CEO of Google and currently on an advisory board for the Department of Defense. Listen to how he breaks down the current US-China relationship.
The entanglement of China and the US is profound. And in fact, everyone complains about China, but our trade with China is going up. And everything we do to try to prevent things, China can nullify. In other words, if you think about the sanctions on Russia over Ukraine, China just, instead of having iPhones in Russia, they have Chinese phones, which are quite good. The key is to find control points that the Chinese cannot replicate.
In the case of microchips, the US found its control point with Dutch company ASML, which owns a monopoly in the microchip market. ASML is the only company in the entire world that manufactures the machines needed to produce advanced microchips. As you can imagine, both the US and China want access to these machines. But listen to Eric Schmidt admit how the US government is using this company against China.
The genius of your strategy is that you found a monopoly that exists in one company in the world that we had control over, which is ASML. And that decision allowed you to then put the regime in place.
Eric doesn't sugarcoat it at all. ASML has a monopoly in the microchip market, and the US government very proudly controls it. This is why the Biden regime threatened both economic sanctions against Japan and the Netherlands, both of whom are chief US allies, if they don't adhere to American interests. What's most fascinating about this entire ordeal is the brutal honesty now coming out about these actions. Just listen to Anya Manuel, executive director of the Aspen Security Forum, who states,
"The United States and our friends and allies have been the undisputed technology leaders for decades. And now we have someone who's running the race and running really fast, and that's China. So the goal here should be for the US and our friends and allies to run faster in this race. There's 2 ways to win a race. One, you hobble the other guy. And Alan and team are working on that. There's another way to do it, which is to run faster ourselves."
To be honest, it's pretty cringe to watch someone laugh and admit the US strategy is to officially use the Tonya Harding approach and, quote, hobble the other guy. But just a couple weeks after this conference, things have dramatically changed. Because earlier this week, Bloomberg reported the US is preparing to exclude semiconductor equipment makers in the Netherlands and Japan from its latest round of restrictions targeting China, warning the plans are fluid and may change. Essentially, the Japanese and Dutch governments told Gina Raimondo, the US Secretary of Commerce, to shove it. In the case of the Netherlands, they hold the ace card in this ordeal because every country in the world, including both China and the United States, need the technology that is only available from ASML. As you can imagine, the news was pleasantly received by investors. Here is a screenshot of what happened to ASML stock after hours this Wednesday, rising nearly 8% in after-hours trading. This goes to show you how US sanctions can influence and change the stock market's direction. And I'll break down a unique opportunity I'm seeing in the market in just a second. But first, I want to show you another report on why this topic of US sanctions will continue to be a major issue in our world moving forward. Earlier this week, the FCMP reported this story, that EU firms are resisting the plan to screen private investment into China. Once again, this is a fascinating development that deals directly with US economic sanctions. This report admits the EU's proposed plan against China was coordinated with the United States. Of course, this really means the US government told the European Union what to do in its ongoing economic battle with China. The US is forcing its allies to turn down lucrative business opportunities in China, which EU countries argue will strengthen the European economy, secure new jobs, and promote prosperity. At least for now, EU countries are speaking out and trying to forge their own pathway around US sanctions. Everyone, there's a reason why we follow geopolitics and study history, because as I've shown you in today's video, US sanctions have completely altered how countries around the world function and influenced how entire industries adapt and change. As militaries around the world prepare for the next generation of warfare, there is one technology that will play a primary role moving forward. And I'm going to break down this trend and tell you more about an opportunity in the market with today's video.
Throw tons of money at a problem. Alright guys, so things are just getting crazier. The US chip war playbook is very simple. First, you throw tons of money at a problem and subsidize companies coming to the US. Step 2 is containment. You ban US companies and your allies from supplying China with the most advanced chips. Step 3 is when you realize the plan isn't working at all and you tighten the noose even more. China's tech isn't collapsing, they are innovating ahead despite all the constraints. A recent report is sending shockwaves through the world. Chinese firms are narrowing the AI gap by developing their own language models. And these are technologies behind generative AI tech like ChatGPT. To power these language models, you need sophisticated chips. The US has placed big restrictions on NVIDIA's high-tech semiconductors, but China's Huawei has developed powerful alternatives. When used to train language models, the Huawei 910B AI chip is just as powerful as NVIDIA's A100. Estimates put the performance at 80 to 120% of the A100's efficiency. This Chinese chip is freaking the US out. It's causing NVIDIA to slash prices of their own chips in China. And we are talking about over 10% off the sticker price just to compete. Banning chips to China only fuels their progress even more. You force Chinese industries to innovate more with less. And it seems China also agrees. Beijing is blocking the use of Intel and AMD chips in their government computers. They're also telling their private companies like Tencent and Baidu to phase out foreign AI chips as well. So this is a very big disaster. Tens of billions of dollars in demand will be leaving Western companies. China used to be a big market for companies like Intel, and because of US sanctions on China, these companies are getting hammered. In 2023, money from China accounted for 27% of Intel's revenue. And since the chip war started, Intel's earnings have collapsed from 80 billion in 2021 to less than 55 billion 2 years later. And things are so bad that they are laying off 15% of their workforce. That's 15,000 jobs, guys. And when a hardware company like Intel is starved of revenue, they can't build new chips or innovate ahead. They enter a doom loop spiral. So to contain China, the US is hurting their own domestic companies. There are only so many customers in the US companies can sell to. Cutting away the largest importer of chips is a recipe for disaster. You know things are bad when even Intel wants to head back to the Chinese market. Their CEO sees the writing on the wall. The tech sanctions will only force Chinese tech to build out their own semiconductors. They will build more affordable hardware while companies buy local chips made at home. You just hasten the demise of Western companies in the country. But Gina Raimondo doesn't really care. The idea, the optics of Washington is to deny China of everything. It's a surface level strategy that sounds smart, it sounds really tough, but it just doesn't work.
On matters of national security, we got to be eyes wide open about the threat. This is the biggest threat we've ever had. And we need to meet the moment, but make no mistake about it. China's not our friend, and we need to be eyes wide open about the extent of that threat. I am ready to win, and I'm ready to do that with all of you, but it's time to open our aperture and challenge the way we've done business in every way if we're going to meet the threat China poses and if we're going to do what needs to be done with this technology.
The problem with US sanctions is how they are forcing the world to pick sides, and this is something no country really wants. You are crippling their economies to pursue your geopolitical objectives. A great example is the US CHIPS Act, and this is a big subsidy the US is throwing to companies to shift production back to the US. Under the Act, the US has allocated a ton of money, and this includes $39 billion in subsidies to get new fabrication plants in the US. Intel, TSMC, and Samsung, these are some of the companies shifting to the US that otherwise wouldn't. They are building foundries in the US only because of the subsidies. The cost of manufacturing is phenomenally high in the US. There are big production issues building a foundry in the middle of the Arizona desert. That's what TSMC is doing. An industry where you need tons of ultra pure water, and you build a plant next to a desert. A very brilliant idea. Maurice Chang, who was the founder of TSMC, warned Nancy Pelosi of the challenge that it is insane, and he admitted that this simply won't work. The US is in over its head. It will be a very expensive exercise in futility. Shifting production to the US will double the cost of chips. It will be non-competitive in the world markets. And this statement highlights the big dilemma chip companies face building plants in America. You'll only be making stuff for the US market. You can forget about exporting production out. Chips made in the US are simply too expensive, and at a certain point, US demand will hit saturation. Semiconductors themselves are inputs, and if prices of that doubles, that means the cost of other products built on chips would only rise. So the entire supply chain now becomes uncompetitive, and this is across the entire US. The CHIPS Act is taking money from US taxpayers to make products more expensive for US consumers, all because you want to punish China. So really make it make sense. Can it get worse? Yes, it absolutely can. In 2023, South Korea warned the US that the CHIPS Act wasn't fair. To get the money, South Korean companies have to sacrifice their ambitions in China. In other words, they have to decouple their production in Beijing. Digging into the details is truly horrendous for the companies. Places like Samsung or SK Hynix will have to limit their chip expansion in China. That means for the next 10 years, no new advanced facility can be built. You can't increase existing production capacity beyond 5%. Any company that violates this restriction will face a clawback of the incentives. They will have to pay back the money to the US government. We must understand how crazy this really is. The US is trying to accomplish two big goals. They want to deindustrialize China's chip foundries. The idea is to restrict capital from flowing into Beijing. The second goal is even more insidious, to cut away global chip foundries away from the world's biggest chip market, to make companies like Samsung and TSMC completely dependent on the US. China buys over 50% of all the chips manufactured globally. And this shouldn't be a surprise. They are the world's factory, and everything they make, especially EVs, needs semiconductors. By building a plant in the US, chip makers will have to sacrifice their own production in China, which means losing more and more market share over the next decade. And you best believe any chips made in the US will also have restrictions slapped on them. It's going to be another Nvidia situation down the road. The problem with the US is that they just don't know when to stop. The CHIPS Act is bad enough, but the US is taking things to the next level. They're about to hit China with even more restrictions. This time, the hammer's going to fall on AI memory chips. The big losers will be South Korea's Samsung and SK Hynix. They are the biggest memory chip producers, holding over 50% market share globally between them. Can Raimondo really do this? Well, the US can use the Foreign Direct Product Rule or the FDPR against South Korean firms. So if a company uses US technology to build their products, Washington can impose restrictions on their exports. And it appears Samsung uses American chip design software. It's really ridiculous. The goal is to stop Chinese companies from accessing Korean high bandwidth memory chips or HBMs. And these are needed to run AI accelerators. The US doesn't want China to build out their own AI tech and to only rely on the less powerful variants from the US. However, this is going to cut away Korea's revenue potential and just lock them into supplying US companies. The AI memory boom is going to soar to the moon. According to Morgan Stanley, demand will go from $18 billion this year to over $70 billion by 2027. So in 3 years' time, the market for HBM chips will more than triple. And we know who will be a big driver of demand. It's going to be the big boogeyman, China. They will be the biggest consumers of chips. According to Bank of America estimates, China accounts for 35% of global memory consumption. And this reliance is giving Korean firms tons of revenue. China's supply chain hasn't developed their own HBMs yet. It could take more than 3 years or maybe 4 years before they can compete. But the catch-up game is nothing new to China. They have done it in multiple industries before, from shipping to electric vehicles. China went from last place to first place within a matter of years. Chinese firms are not sitting still either. CXMT is investing $2.4 billion to build a new chip plant to develop AI memory chips. They are also talking to South Korea to buy the tools to produce the chips. And what do you think will happen once China begins making their own HBMs? They replace all local demand with their own production. They will displace all foreign semiconductor imports, especially those from the US. In a big twist of irony, the US is actually helping China flesh out the entire supply chain across the entire semiconductor industry. US restrictions are helping Beijing sanction-proof their most critical industry. Raimondo should really get a medal. America's strategy is to beggar thy neighbor to contain their biggest rival. But it's a delaying action campaign. Chinese industries will slowly gain ground while you gradually lose ground, and you burn a ton of money in the process. And US allies are getting really sick and tired of this. In a shocking report, ASML from the Netherlands and Tokyo Electron from Japan gates to dodge the new US chip export rules. In other words, the sanctions have failed. These two companies are the main suppliers of chip-making equipment to the world, the lithography machines. And this is a clear sign that G7 companies are getting tired of US sanctions. After the US first announced the sanctions, Tokyo Electron and ASML stock fell by 10, 20 or even 30%. It was a bloodbath and investors got clobbered. Crippling your own industries for the US isn't a good idea. Cutting off China is cutting away 50% of your revenue. It will cripple the future of semiconductors. However, this just got weirder. Japan and the Netherlands have been exempted and can export to China now, and South Korea might actually win the exemption as well. However, the US wants to protect the G7, but other countries like Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia might be on a chopping block. They might be banned from exporting to Chinese foundries. Washington is basically choosing favorites here, and it's going to piss off many countries around the world. I find this grossly unfair, right? Either you target the whole world or you stop all the sanctions. So companies will have to choose. Do we continue using US technology or do we sell chips to the biggest market in the world? The answer should be ultra obvious by now. But let's circle back to the CHIPS Act because it's about to go off the rails once again. The grand plan is to reshore manufacturing back to the US. However, it's still impossible to escape Chinese goods. So US lawmakers are going to self-sabotage themselves again. It's like they really can't help themselves. They want recipients of the CHIPS Act money to boycott Chinese tools. Intel and TSMC, for example, won't be able to buy Chinese gears for their US plants, which means their tools will have to be American made. This is yet another short-sighted measure to decouple from China. Sure, you can buy everything made in the USA, but global supply chains exist for a reason. It is to keep manufacturing costs down to keep it at a minimal. The chips made in the US are going to stay in the US. The price will be so high that exporting them out will be impossible. So the big loser will be the US consumer once again. They will get fleeced twice, first in their taxes and when they buy stuff with chips in them. So if you're American, be prepared for higher inflation. Your computers, refrigerators, and your cars are going to get more expensive. Reshoring sounds nice, it sounds great, I love it. But the way the US does it doesn't make logical sense. But let me know what you think. Will the
What if Kim Jong-un makes North Korea a member of BRICS? This will make the West nervous from the very moment of membership. The West is being continuously disturbed by new alliances that are determined to end its monopoly. However, in reality, the currency world order in which the West thrives is destined to stay for a few more years. Replacing something that has been there for centuries is not easier unless someone like Kim Jong-un joins the forces. If there is a country the West fears more than Russia and China combined, it's North Korea with its supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. What if he announces to join BRICS and bring his power and control to the table? What if he offers BRICS to leave the confrontation with the West to him, where he will take care of NATO? So, is it true that North Korea is planning to join BRICS and change things forever? Let's find out. The Korean Herald reported that North Korea's state media claimed that an expansion of the BRICS nations could challenge and potentially hasten the end of the US dollar's dominance. Jong Il-hyun, an international affairs analyst from North Korea, criticized the US for leveraging the dollar and its military might to exert hegemonism. This shows the internal sentiments in North Korea and what the regime might be thinking of doing internationally. In an article published by the Korean Central News Agency, Jong stated that the growing international efforts to reduce reliance on the dollar and the increasing number of countries joining BRICS are accelerating the decline of the dollar as a key currency, undermining US hegemony. Jong further criticized the US, saying that the US has resorted to every means and method to maintain the supremacy of the dollar as the key currency and unhesitatingly committed despicable acts of imposing financial sanctions on those countries which incur its displeasure by abusing the predominant position of the dollar. Recently, North Korea has been vocal in its criticism of US foreign policies through articles in KCNA authored by international affairs analysts. North Korea's recent interest in joining the BRICS alliance marks a striking departure from its long-standing geopolitical isolation. Historically known for its isolationism and defiance, North Korea's willingness to engage with BRICS, a coalition of emerging economies, indicates a desire for greater economic integration and a possible shift in its geopolitical strategy. This development comes at a critical time for BRICS, as member countries aim to reshape the global financial landscape and challenge the dominance of the US dollar. It turns out that Kim Jong-un is thinking about joining BRICS mainly because of its goal of an independent financial system and a new currency. Within BRICS, discussions have centered on creating alternative payment systems and currencies to lessen reliance on Western-controlled financial infrastructure. For North Korea, the attraction of BRICS lies in the potential access to these evolving payment structures, particularly those involving central bank digital currencies. By bypassing the Western-dominated SWIFT network, Pyongyang sees an opportunity to gain greater autonomy in its economic transactions. Not only that, but North Korea can once again enter into world matters only if it becomes a BRICS member. That's because BRICS nations exert considerable influence on regional and international affairs. They advocate for a multipolar world order and reforms of international institutions like the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund to ensure that the voices of developing countries are heard and respected. Therefore, North Korea has begun to gradually soften its isolationist stance in recent years, engaging with some BRICS member states like Russia and Iran, which are also under extensive international sanctions. This engagement suggests a broader geopolitical strategy to align with emerging powers and challenge the dominance of established international players. But what will happen if North Korea officially joins BRICS? Well, in this case, North Korea could gain substantial economic opportunities by joining BRICS. This membership would open up access to a larger trading bloc, potentially helping to bypass some of the international sanctions that have severely impacted its economy. Mainly, the biggest reason new countries are willing to become BRICS members is the protection that BRICS can offer from sanctions. While Western sanctions would still apply, BRICS membership might allow North Korea to trade more freely with BRICS members and their allies. Additionally, North Korea could attract investments from BRICS countries, especially China and Russia, which have historically had closer ties with North Korea. This could lead to much-needed funding for infrastructure projects, resource development, and industrial expansion. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. Diplomatically, joining BRICS would elevate North Korea's international standing. It would provide a platform to voice its concerns and policies while aligning with major global players like China and Russia. This alignment could offer diplomatic cover and support against Western pressures. Furthermore, being part of a significant economic bloc could give North Korea support in international forums, potentially weakening the unified stance of the West on sanctions and isolation. Economically and technologically, North Korea could benefit from the expertise of BRICS countries, particularly China and India, which are leaders in various technological fields. Technology transfer and collaboration in areas like agriculture, industry, and information technology could greatly benefit North Korea. However, North Korea would not be the only one to benefit. BRICS as an alliance will benefit from North Korea as well. For BRICS, North Korea's inclusion would enhance geopolitical influence. North Korea's strategic location between China, South Korea, and Japan would provide BRICS with a foothold in Northeast Asia, increasing the bloc's influence in a critical region. North Korea's inclusion would also add a significant military aspect to BRICS, potentially counterbalancing NATO's presence in Asia. North Korea's large military and strategic capabilities, particularly its missile technology, could be a valuable asset for the bloc. It can be used as a balancing act by BRICS to repel any confrontation chances. Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier warned about expanding military ties, and now they can use North Korea to add a deterrent that can handle Western military goals expansion. North Korea's nuclear capabilities add a layer of deterrence that could be leveraged in geopolitical negotiations and standoffs, strengthening BRICS' negotiating position globally. Integrating North Korea's capabilities with BRICS could lead to enhanced defense cooperation. Joint military exercises, technology sharing, and strategic planning could make BRICS a formidable counterweight to Western military alliances. Economically, North Korea is rich in minerals and other natural resources that are largely untapped. Reports claim that North Korea is sitting on natural resources worth over $10 trillion. BRICS countries, particularly China and Russia, could invest in these resources, benefiting both North Korea and BRICS members. Additionally, North Korea's workforce and industrial base could be integrated into the BRICS economic framework, providing cheap labor and manufacturing capabilities that could benefit the bloc's economic dynamics. However, for many, the claim that North Korea might be joining BRICS seems doubtful. That's because if this happens, it will be over for the West. In early 2024, a claim began circulating online suggesting that North Korea was seeking to join BRICS. However, this claim lacked credible evidence. An official from one of the BRICS member states informed that North Korea had never formally expressed any intent to join the alliance, and there had been no internal discussions on the matter. However, later, on May 11, Crypto News, an internet outlet focused on cryptocurrency, published an article suggesting that North Korea was attracted to BRICS as a strategic alliance to alleviate some of the economic pressures from sanctions. Various media outlets believe that backdoor discussion might already be going on between North Korea and BRICS members. Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean President Kim Jong-un met, and chances are that this topic was discussed. Putin's visit to North Korea has also raised concerns about potential military cooperation between the two nations. This development has been closely watched and reported on, adding another layer of complexity to North Korea's potential BRICS membership. According to Russian state media, President Vladimir Putin is working to enhance bilateral interaction with North Korea through collaborative efforts. He expressed a desire to foster mutually beneficial and equal cooperation between the two nations. The meeting also touched on the influence of the United States and Western powers on the global stage. Putin criticized the US for imposing increasingly harsh and unacceptable demands on North Korea while reaffirming the goal of resolving all differences peacefully. Now there are opinions that Russia might be encouraging North Korea to join BRICS and enter the world's affairs. However, the news won't be made public until the talks are done and North Korea officially applies for BRICS memberships. What do you think? Should North Korea join BRICS and add a military aspect to this economic alliance? What if North Korea allies for BRICS membership? Will BRICS members like China and India allow it to become a member? In the comments section right below,
The United States is leading a new coup attempt in Venezuela and is trying to impose a new government on the country. Now, this might sound like deja vu because this is exactly what Washington did 5 years ago. In 2019, the Donald Trump administration recognized a little-known right-wing opposition politician named Juan Guaido as the supposed president of Venezuela, despite the fact that he had never participated in a presidential election. Well, here we are in 2024, and now the Biden administration announced that it recognized another right-wing opposition politician named Edmundo Gonzalez as the supposed president of Venezuela. That is to say, the U.S. is launching a coup attempt.
Nicolas Maduro came out and said the small hats are behind this, and these two people are really small hats masquerading behind Spanish names.
And now the U.S. is pressuring other countries around the world to join it in recognizing a new president of Venezuela. To justify this, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, published a statement, and he presented no evidence that the election was supposedly stolen by the actual president, Nicolás Maduro. Instead, he only cited sources that are funded by the U.S. government, as I will show today. He cited sources funded by the U.S. State Department. He cited right-wing opposition groups in Venezuela, and he cited exit polling done by biased groups in Venezuela and by a U.S. firm that works for the U.S. government and is linked to the CIA. Today, I'll be showing in detail how the U.S. government's claims are not backed up by evidence. And also, it is so ironic that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, is helping to lead this coup attempt right now, given that the Biden administration is currently backing numerous dictatorships. For instance, in Pakistan, the elected Prime Minister Imran Khan was overthrown in a US-backed coup in 2022, and he was imprisoned on bogus charges. And the US helped Pakistan's coup regime, that's unofficially led by the military, steal the recent election. And furthermore, the US is backing an unelected coup regime right now in Peru after the democratically elected left-wing president, Pedro Castillo, was overthrown and imprisoned without charges. And the current right-wing president of Peru, who's very corrupt, Dina Boluarte, was never elected. And yet Antony Blinken recognizes her while he claims without any evidence that there was fraud in Venezuela and refuses to recognize the Venezuelan president, Maduro. And of course, as Antony Blinken says this and backs a coup attempt, he's also supporting the horrific crimes against humanity that Israel is carrying out in Gaza, with unflinching support from the Biden administration, billions of dollars of weapons. Antony Blinken is overseeing all of that. So he clearly does not care in any way about human rights. He is overseeing the most monstrous violations of human rights imaginable right now being carried out against the Palestinian people. He does not care. I explained in a recent video, which I will link to in the description below, why the US government has spent so many years constantly backing coups to try to overthrow Venezuela's democratically elected government. The brief summary is that Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. It also has many other natural resources that US corporations want to get their hands on. Furthermore, Venezuela for 20 years now has been governed by a revolutionary project known as the Bolivarian Revolution that is committed to challenging capitalism and imperialism and US neocolonialism. Venezuela has built regional institutions to try to integrate Latin America and challenge the dictatorship of the US dollar. Venezuela has also formed a close partnership with China and Russia and Iran, and has tried to build a multipolar world challenging US hegemony. So for 2 decades now, the US has backed numerous coup attempts in Venezuela. In April of 2002, there was a briefly successful military coup that overthrew Venezuela's democratically elected leftist president, Hugo Chavez, for 2 days. The mainstream British newspaper, The Guardian, reported at the time that the George W. Bush administration played a leading role in backing this coup. And in fact, just a few weeks before the US-backed coup, the Venezuelan coup leader, the rich businessman Pedro Carmona, he met with top US government officials. And just a few months before the coup, the Venezuelan army's chief of staff, a top general, visited the Pentagon to meet with top US military officials. And then he helped to lead the coup against Venezuela's elected president. And during this latest coup attempt in 2024, the corporate media coverage of Venezuela has been so outrageous and ridiculous and full of fake news. In fact, a right-wing media outlet in Spain called Intereconomia brought on as a guest the former coup leader, Pedro Carmona, who overthrew Venezuela's elected president in a military coup for 2 days, backed by the US. The Spanish media outlet invited him on TV to accuse President Maduro of, quote, mega electoral fraud with no evidence. So quite literally, the media in the West is bringing on coup leaders to accuse Venezuela's elected president of fraud. I mean, it is absolutely incredible how blatant this US-backed coup attempt is. During the time of this coup in 2002, the US immediately recognized the unelected coup regime led by a right-wing oligarch. That's why it's laughable today seeing the US government claim that there was supposedly electoral fraud in Venezuela, citing as supposed evidence US government-funded organizations. However, Washington faces a very big obstacle, which is the fact that many governments in Latin America are not going along with this US-backed coup attempt. In fact, on the 31st of July, there was a vote in the Organization of American States, the OAS, which is basically a US-controlled organization that has backed many coups across Latin America. And in this vote, many countries in the region did not go along with the US, including the biggest countries in Latin America, Brazil and Mexico, including Venezuela's neighbor, Colombia, including Bolivia and Honduras and Belize, and numerous countries in the Caribbean. They did not vote for this resolution that was introduced by the far-right governments in the region, with the support in particular of Argentina's far-right US-backed leader, Javier Milei, who is closely collaborating with the CIA and Israel. And of course, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba are not members of the OAS. They left the organization, criticizing it for backing coups and acting as what they refer to as the U.S. Ministry of the Colonies, as an arm of U.S. colonialism. And therefore, so many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean did not support this resolution, and therefore it did not pass in the OAS. This was a failure for the US-backed coup attempt in Venezuela. Now, I mentioned that Venezuela is not even a member of the OAS. It officially applied to leave in 2017, and that process is 2 years long. So as of 2019, Venezuela is not a member. However, 2019 is also when the Trump administration recognized unelected puppet Juan Guaido as the supposed president, and the OAS, which is basically controlled by the US, recognized him as the so-called president of Venezuela. So it's deeply ironic that the OAS is now trying to condemn Venezuela because they actually don't even officially recognize the real president, Maduro. But very few people in Latin America are surprised by the role of the OAS in trying to rubber stamp this coup, given that in 2019, the OAS backed a far-right coup that overthrew Bolivia's democratically elected left-wing president, Evo Morales. So the OAS has been used so many times by the US to back coups. And in fact, the US government has basically admitted that the OAS is a political arm. The US State Department in 2018 published a congressional budget justification that requested more money to fund the OAS because the OAS is based in Washington and largely funded by the US government. And this US State Department document described the OAS as an organization that, quote, promotes US political and economic interests in the Western Hemisphere by countering the influence of anti-US countries such as Venezuela. So, of course, a US government-funded organization that serves US interests and counters Venezuela is going to back another US coup attempt in Venezuela. It's not a surprise. In fact, Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known as AMLO, he actually openly criticized the OAS and he condemned it for constantly interfering and intervening in the internal affairs of other countries. The Mexican president said at a press conference, quote, "Why does the OAS have to get involved? That is interference. That is why the OAS has no credibility." And then he said, quote, "On what basis is the OAS claiming that the other candidate won? Where is the proof?" And then he said, quote, "The OAS is not a democratic nor an autonomous organization. It does not represent the countries of America." And of course, in Latin America, when people say America, they're not referring to the US. They say America is the entire region of America. The US is Estados Unidos. He's saying that the OAS does not represent the countries of Latin America. Instead, of course, the implication is he's saying that the OAS only represents the United States, where it's based. And in fact, Mexico's incoming president-elect, Claudia Sheinbaum, who won the elections this year, and she'll become president of Mexico in December, she also condemned the OAS for interference. She said the OAS, quote, has had a role more of interventionism than coordinating between countries in the region. And she said, quote, "The most important thing is the self-determination of the people of Venezuela." So here you can see another example of numerous politicians in Mexico, the current president and the upcoming president-elect, saying the OAS does not represent us. This is a tool of interventionism in our region. However, it's not just many countries in Latin America that are opposing the US-backed coup attempt in Venezuela. This, like so many things in the world today, has also become a larger geopolitical conflict. And China and Russia and Iran have backed Venezuelan President Maduro. Many other countries in the global south and Africa and Asia have backed President Maduro. So essentially, it's the US and a small handful of right-wing allies in Latin America that are backing this coup attempt. And what's especially hilarious is that Peru's unelected right-wing coup regime was the first government to recognize Venezuela's right-wing opposition figure, Edmundo Gonzalez, as the supposed president-elect of Venezuela. Again, I need to emphasize, Peru right now is governed by an unelected coup regime that is extremely corrupt, that killed dozens of pro-democracy protesters after a coup overthrew the elected left-wing president, Pedro Castillo, who was imprisoned without trial. This dictatorship was the first country that recognized Venezuela's right-wing figure, Edmundo Gonzalez, as so-called president. I mean, the jokes write themselves. This has nothing whatsoever to do with democracy. This is about oligarchy. This is an attempt by the US empire and its right-wing puppets in Latin America that are led by big corporations and rich oligarchs. They are trying to reimpose control on Venezuela. And this is also why the billionaire oligarch Elon Musk is playing a key role in backing this coup attempt in Venezuela as well. I discussed that in a recent video showing how Elon Musk is collaborating with some of the far-right forces in Latin America, especially Argentina's far-right president Javier Milei, who wants to give his country's natural resources over to Elon Musk and other oligarchs. Now, while this is all going on, a US government official actually indirectly threatened to invade Venezuela. That was the implication of a tweet. Mark Feuerstein is a longtime regime change operative who works with USAID, which is a CIA cutout that has been involved, for instance, in arming the Contras, the far-right extremist paramilitary group in Nicaragua in the 1980s, backed by the CIA. They claim that they talk about humanitarianism and aid. No, they're an arm of the CIA. And on Twitter, Mark Feuerstein, he made a parallel between the US invasion of Panama in 1989 that overthrew Panama's leader, Noriega. In 1989, the US military invaded Panama and killed hundreds of civilians and overthrew the Panamanian government, which was partially aimed at trying to reimpose US control over the Panama Canal. And now what we see is that this US government official is drawing a parallel to Venezuela. And he said, quote, by permitting a fair vote count, Maduro can avoid the risk of Noriega's fate. So he's saying very clearly that the US has the possibility of invading Venezuela and overthrowing the Venezuelan president Maduro like it did to Panama. This is very extreme. And by the way, while we're on the subject of this US government regime change operative, Mark Feuerstein, he also worked with a very shady DC-based firm called CLS Strategies, which was exposed in 2020 as being paid millions of dollars to spread fake news for the right-wing Venezuelan opposition, for the right-wing coup regime that was backed by the US government in Bolivia, and also for the right-wing opposition in Mexico. And again, this operation was being partially overseen by this USAID operative, Mark Feuerstein, who is now once again threatening Venezuela. So if you see the constant flood of fake news and disinformation on social media that is claiming all these outrageous things about Venezuela, and they're showing videos from other countries and from years ago and claiming that it's Venezuela today, keep in mind that we have evidence in the past of these US government-linked organizations being paid millions of dollars by right-wing forces in Venezuela, Bolivia, and Mexico to spread fake news on their behalf. And furthermore, the notorious US mercenary Eric Prince is also threatening Venezuela's President Maduro. Eric Prince is a far-right political operative who was previously the leader of the mercenary firm Blackwater that was notorious for killing large numbers of civilians in Iraq. And in fact, employees of Blackwater were imprisoned. They were found guilty and imprisoned. But what happened? Donald Trump pardoned them, despite the fact that they killed large numbers of Iraqi civilians. And one of the reasons that he did this is because Trump is a close political ally of Eric Prince. And on Twitter, Prince pointed to a bounty that was sent out by the Trump administration that offered $15 million for anyone who would try to arrest the Venezuelan president Maduro. And Eric Prince called for the current US government, the Biden administration, to increase these bounties to $100 million. So, I mean, these extremists are like mafia leaders. They are calling for essentially the head of a foreign leader, of the president of a foreign government. This is what the US government is actually like on the international stage. It is a mafioso. But I have to say, we can't be too surprised because, like I said, Eric Prince is a far-right political operative, and he openly called for the United States to colonize Latin America and Africa. He is an extremist colonialist mercenary who wants the US empire to colonize the world. And that's why he wants to overthrow Venezuela's president Maduro. This is all part of a US neo-colonialist scheme to reimpose control on Latin America. Now, I want to go back to this statement that was made by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the 1st of August, in which he announced that the US government recognizes Edmundo Gonzalez as the supposed president of Venezuela. This is the opposition figure. Now, in this statement, Blinken only cited sources that are funded by the US government. As the first example, Blinken cited what he described as the Independent Carter Center. The Carter Center is a political organization that was founded by the former US President Jimmy Carter, and it is not independent. It is directly funded by the US State Department, where Antony Blinken is the leader. He's the Secretary of State. This is not hidden. If you go to the Carter Center's website, they disclose their so-called funding partners, the groups that fund them. They include the United States Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which is a CIA cutout that was used to arm the Contras in Nicaragua in the 1980s by the CIA. This organization, the Carter Center, is also funded by the Australian government, the Canadian government, the Belgian government. It is funded by Palantir, which is a CIA and a Pentagon contractor that does mass surveillance. It is funded by the European Union. It is funded by the British Foreign Office. It is funded by another US government organization, Freedom House, which is a neoconservative regime change organization. It's funded by the government of Germany. It's funded by the CIA-linked foundations, the Gates Foundation and Open Society. It's funded by the US-dominated World Bank. It's funded by Meta, the major US corporation. And the most hilarious irony of all is that the Carter Center claims to be a leading voice on democracy and election monitoring. But you know who funds it? Gulf monarchies like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. They fund this organization that talks about democracy. So you have to ask, what is the goal of an organization like this? Why would the US government fund it? Why would big US corporations that are linked to the CIA fund it? Why would Saudi Arabia fund an organization that is supposedly dedicated to democracy and election monitoring? Saudi Arabia is a hereditary absolute monarchy. The UAE is a monarchy. Qatar is a monarchy. Why would they fund this? Because this is a political organization that is serving their geopolitical interests. They're investing in this organization. They're not just donations. They are political investments, just like big corporations donate to US political campaigns as a form of investment, because they know that if they fund a politician, when the politician is elected, that politician will have to serve their interests. And this is why it's not surprising that ultimately the Carter Center, which is funded by the US government, did not recognize the electoral victory of Venezuelan President Maduro. However, if you read their statement, what becomes clear is that they have no evidence of fraud. Instead, what they simply say is they cannot verify or corroborate the results of the election declared by Venezuela's National Electoral Council. So what this really is it's a question of he said, she said. there is no evidence of fraud. So what it comes down to is, do you believe the US government and the opposition that it funds and the organizations that it funds, those are the ones claiming fraud? Or do you believe the Venezuelan government? You have to pick one. And the US government is obviously picking the organizations that it funds that are carrying out a coup attempt that it is backing. So now let's go back to this statement from Antony Blinken from the US State Department. The other source that Blinken cites is the so-called democratic opposition in Venezuela, which is literally funded by the US government. And he said that the opposition in Venezuela has published some of the tally sheets received from polling stations. But this is information that is manipulated and in the hands of the Venezuelan opposition, which is declaring itself the victor of the election and trying to overthrow the president. So they have every incentive to tamper with the results, to manipulate what is being published. We have no way to verify that what they are publishing is real. It's simply the US government saying, we recognize the opposition that we fund and the tally sheets that they are publishing on their websites that we have no way of verifying, and we have no idea if they're actually real. So instead, the final so-called source that Antony Blinken cited is he said that independent observers have corroborated these facts, including he mentioned election day exit polls, but he doesn't actually name who those are. He just says independent observers. But some of the exit polls that were done by polling firms in Venezuela showed results that were very similar to the final results. For instance, the major polling firm Interlaces in Venezuela, they published an exit poll that estimated that Maduro would win with 54.6% of the vote, and that the US-backed opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, would win with 42.8% of the vote. That was very similar to the final results. So why is the US government ignoring this exit poll? Because in reality, Antony Blinken, in his statement, he's referencing an exit poll that was done by a New Jersey-based US firm that works closely with US government propaganda outlets that were founded by the CIA. So Antony Blinken is citing a US government-backed organization that did an exit poll that claimed that the opposition would win in order to claim as evidence that the opposition won. So once again, we see this complete circular logic. So you're forced to believe what the US government claims in order to back these claims of electoral fraud. And I'm going to briefly go through an investigation that I published over at geopoliticaleconomy.com. I will link to it in the description below. In this article, I showed how the US political operative who oversaw this exit poll in Venezuela is a man named Rob Farbman, whose specialty is operations in the Middle East and North Africa. And he previously worked in places like Iraq and Ukraine and Georgia, countries where the US has invaded or targeted the country for regime change, like the 2014 US-backed coup in Ukraine, or today the US is targeting Georgia. The US invaded Iraq. So this guy is extremely suspicious. He's very shady. And who are his top clients? He's worked with British state propaganda, the BBC, and US state propaganda, Voice of America, the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. What are these organizations? They are US government propaganda organizations that are overseen by the US government propaganda agency, which is known as the US Agency for Global Media. And these propaganda organs were literally founded by the CIA. This was admitted in a 1977 article published by the New York Times, and it described these media outlets as part of a, quote, worldwide propaganda network built by the CIA, including Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. And originally, Radio Free Europe was founded as, quote, Radio Liberation from Bolshevism. That was the name, Radio Liberation from Bolshevism. This was a CIA propaganda organ. They actually don't hide this very well. if you go to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's website, they admit that they were originally founded by the CIA. So we're supposed to believe that a US polling firm that works with US government propaganda outlets founded by the CIA and that was previously active in Ukraine, Iraq, and Georgia, we're supposed to believe that the polling that it does in Venezuela on behalf of the Venezuelan opposition, who they were clearly collaborating with, we're supposed to believe that their poll is legitimate. These are the only sources that the US State Department cited. Again, the US State Department funded Carter Center, the right-wing opposition in Venezuela, which is also funded by the US government, people like the extremist Maria Corina Machado, who has led numerous organizations like, for instance, Sumate, which was funded by the US government, as I'm going to show in another report. And WikiLeaks cables show that she has collaborated over many years with the US Embassy, with the US government. So the US State Department is citing people it funds who are claiming they won the election. And then the only other source they cite is so-called exit polls, but they ignore the exit polls that show that Maduro was going to win. And instead, they're obviously referencing exit polls done by a US government-backed organization linked to the CIA. So here we can see that this is another blatant US-backed coup attempt. But the difference between this US-backed coup attempt now in 2024 and the US-backed coup attempt where Trump recognized Juan Guaido in 2019, the difference now is that Latin America is much more divided, because in 2019, many of the governments in Latin America had right-wing political leaders, whereas now in Latin America, there are still many left-wing governments, and the left-wing governments are either neutral or are openly supporting Venezuela, whereas the right-wing governments in places like Argentina, led by far-right extremist Javier Milei, or in Ecuador, which is led by a literal US citizen, he's the president, a US citizen, and then the right-wing unelected coup regime in Peru, and then a small handful of small right-wing governments. They're the only governments in the region that are supporting this US-led coup attempt. Brazil, Colombia, Bolivia, Mexico, Honduras, Belize, numerous countries in the Caribbean, they are not backing this US coup attempt. And of course, Nicaragua and Cuba have already recognized President Maduro. So the US is more diplomatically isolated than it wants you to think. And in reality, of course, the corporate media is going to continue spreading ridiculous disinformation about Venezuela. Billionaire oligarchs like Elon Musk are going to spread fake news about Venezuela. But the reality is that the US does not have a lot of foreign diplomatic support for this coup attempt. There will probably be some governments in Europe that join along with this coup, but most countries in the global south are not joining along. China and Russia and Iran are not joining along. They've already recognized Venezuela. And the US has already imposed a brutal economic blockade on Venezuela. So what are they going to do? Impose more sanctions? Another blockade? Venezuela is already one of the most heavily sanctioned countries on earth. Now, there is a small possibility that the US government tries to invade Venezuela to overthrow President Maduro. This was threatened by the USAID operative Mark Fierstein, who I talked about earlier, who's the longtime US government regime change operative at the CIA cutout USAID. He drew a parallel to the US invasion of Panama in 1989, where the US invaded the country and overthrew the president and killed hundreds of civilians. There's a possibility that the US could try to do this in Venezuela, but honestly, I don't think that's likely, especially considering that Russia has expressed support for Venezuela and would not tolerate the US invading Venezuela, its ally. So we're no longer in 1989, or we're no longer in this unipolar world in which the US is a global dictatorship that tries to overthrow any foreign government, invade foreign governments, and impose leaders on foreign governments. We're no longer in that era. We're in a multipolar world. The US can try to back another coup, but the world is not going to go along. The majority of the world is not going to go along with this US coup attempt. Maybe a few puppet regimes in Latin America and its obedient proxies in Europe, they'll go along with the US, but the world is not going to go along with this coup attempt, which again is simply the latest in a long, long line of coup attempts. If you want to know more information about those previous US-backed coup attempts in Venezuela and why the US has been so obsessed with trying to overthrow Venezuela's government, I will link in the description below the other recent videos that I did explaining that. But I'm going to conclude here. I'm Ben Nord.
Cool. Follow me.